नमस्कार। मधुबनी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल के चौथे संस्करण में आप सबका स्वागत है। आज हम सब उपस्थित हुए हैं मधुबनी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल MLF की एक महत्वपूर्ण अंग एक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संगोष्ठी को लेकर जो 12 से 15 दिसंबर 2021 तक ललित नारायण मिथिला यूनिवर्सिटी दरभंगा में आयोजित हो रहा है। The International Symposium on Maithili, captioned Language Mapping of Maithili Beyond the Boundaries, is being organized by Center for Studies of Tradition and Systems in collaboration with Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, and the Directorate of Distance Education, LNMU, Darbhanga. मैं CIIL एवं LNMU के प्रतिनिधियों का हार्दिक स्वागत करती हूँ। मैं स्वागत करती हूँ संगोष्ठी के आज के प्रमुख वक्ता प्रोफेसर रामावतार यादव सर का। सर कृपया मंच पर आकर उसे सुशोभित करें। मैं स्वागत करती हूँ आज के दूसरे वक्ता प्रोफेसर गिरीश नाथ झा सर का। सर कृपया मंच पर आ जाएं। आज की हमारी तीसरी वक्ता है डॉक्टर शिवांगी प्रिया, जो किन्हीं कारणों की वजह से फिजिकल रूप से नहीं जुड़ पाएंगी, पर वो अपनी प्रस्तुति ऑनलाइन के माध्यम से देंगी। यहाँ उपस्थित सभी विद्वान जनों एवं शोधार्थी जो हमसे ऑनलाइन या ऑफलाइन जुड़े हैं, मैं आप सबका हार्दिक अभिनंदन करती हूँ। आज की संगोष्ठी की अध्यक्षता करेंगे रामानंद झा रमन सर। सर कृपया मंच पर आ जाएं। धन्यवाद। कार्यक्रम के संचालन को आगे बढ़ाने हेतु मैं अब बुलाना चाहूंगी डॉक्टर सुशांत कुमार को। सर
धन्यवाद काफी। हम सुशांत मधुबनी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल के द्वारा आयोजित ललित नारायण मिथिला विश्वविद्यालय के कई सभागार में होवे वाला कार्यक्रम में सबसे पहले दू शब्द कह दी जे ई अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संगोष्ठी जो भऽ रहल छै, एकर विषय छै लैंग्वेज मैपिंग ऑफ मैथिली बियॉन्ड द बाउंड्रीज। मैथिली भाषा मानचित्रण सीमा से फराक। मैथिली नेपाल, बिहार, नेपाल, भारत। एकर बोली, भाषा, एकर व्याकरण बहुत चर्चा लगभग 100 वर्ष 1936 से उससे पहले लगभग 100 साल से चल रहल छै। एकर मानकीकरण के गप ई जे 12 से 15 दिसंबर के बीच में हो वाला जे फेस्टिवल भऽ रहल छै, एहिमे एहि पर चर्चा चलैत रहल छै। इस संगोष्ठी के माध्यम से राष्ट्रीय विद्वान होते छै हमरा सामने छै। हम शुरुआत में सबसे पहले सुनब हम तीन गोटा के, रामावतार यादव सर के, गिरीश नाथ झा सर के और शिवांगी प्रिया के। बहुत रास वाद छै, विवाद छै, भाषा के लऽ कऽ, लिपि के लऽ कऽ, ओकर नेपाल में मिथिला के नेपाल के हिस्सा और मिथिला के भारत के हिस्सा दोनों के बोली में कतो समानता है कतो अंतर है। बिहार में जखन शुरुआत में देखै छियै वर्णनाकर से लऽ कऽ एखन धरि बहुत व्यापक रूप से परिवर्तन भऽ चुकल छै। विद्यापति से एखन धरि देखै छियै व्यापक रूप से परिवर्तन भऽ चुकल छै। गिरेशन के देखै छियै एकटा मानक रूप देखै पड़ै छै लेकिन ओकरो में चेंज भऽ गेल छै बहुत रास। एखन तक स्पष्ट रूप से हम सब स्थिर नहीं भऽ पेलियै जे हम केकरा स्वीकार करिए और केकरा अस्वीकार करिए। संभावना छै जे इस संगोष्ठी के माध्यम से कोनो एकटा बात अबै जे हमरा सबके भविष्य के लिए काज करे। हम सबसे पहले आमंत्रित कर रहल छियै एहिठमन बीज भाषण के लिए जे हमर मुख्य वक्ता सेहो छै आदरणीय रामावतार यादव सर के जे प्रसिद्ध भाषा वैज्ञानिक छै, भारत के बल्कि नेपाल के रहनिहार छै। रामावतार यादव सर स्वतंत्र रूप से लेखन कर रहल छै, कतेको सम्मान पुरस्कार सबसे सम्मानित छै। हम संगोष्ठी के शुरुआत में आमंत्रित कर रहल छियनि सादर रूप में आदरणीय रामावतार यादव सर।
Chairman, distinguished participants, and ladies and gentlemen. The title of my presentation this evening is The Nepal-Tirhut Connection, a linguistic analysis of Middle Maithili archival literary texts. I must say I'm both honored and humbled to be chosen to give a keynote speech to the International Symposium on Maithili, organized under the aegis of the Center for Studies of Tradition and Systems in joint collaboration with the CIIL Mysore and the Lalit Narayan University Darbhanga, and held in the premises of the Kaleshwar Singh Darbhanga Sanskrit University in the historic town of Darbhanga. I wish to thank Dr. Savita Jharkhan of Delhi College of Arts and Commerce and the authorities of the CIIL for the kind invitation. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to preface my presentation with a recital of a total of 3 excerpts that are deemed quintessential, even pivotal, to setting the tenor of the conference or the symposium. Okay. begin with an excerpt from Leonard Bloomfield, the most renowned American linguist in the early 30s of the last century, from his very famous book called Language, published in 1933. Some of you might know. Since written records give us direct information about the speech habits of the past, the first step in the study of linguistic change, wherever we have written record, is the study of these records. And that's what I'm trying to do. The next one comes from Shashinath Jha, preface to his 1981 work, Lochan Krita Rag Tarangini. He edited that book, and in the preface, this is what he has to say. मैथिली साहित्य के दुर्भाग्य रहल अछि जे एकर प्राचीन पोथी सबक मूल घोटियाल जा रहल अछि। वर्ण रत्नाकरक मूल अप्राप्त। करमनी पदावली बाबू नगेंद्र गुप्त हेरोलन। राम भद्रपुर पदावली सेहो नष्ट भेल। आओ ई राग तरंगिनी लुप्त भ गेल। केवल नेपाल पदावली एखनो नेपाल अभिलेखालय में सुरक्षित अछि, से हो वो नेपाल में अछि तैं बचल अछि। I wish to thank Shashinath for kind words about Nepal. Teaser excerpt is from Govind Jha, 2015. छोटी बट गंभीर प्रकृति के पुस्तक निकाले 2015 में। 7 रेखा 7 रंग। तो कहे छै दोसर दिस संस्कृतज्ञ यूरोपीय विद्वान सब भारत पहुंचला तो एतय अमूल्य ग्रंथ सबक अपार भंडार और सुरक्षित अवस्था में यत्र तत्र छिड़ियाल देख के सहसा लोभा गेला। आ जेना होते ना बटोर बटोर अपन ग्रंथागार भरत गेला। मिथिला महामहोपाध्याय 5 कौड़ी झा 5 कौड़ी में, आ बंगालक 7 कौड़ी मुखोपाध्याय 7 कौड़ी में अपन धरोहर बेचैत गेला। That's the sad situation. I begin with my main presentation now. It begins with what I call prolegomena. I wish to speak today on the rather under-investigated topic of a linguistic analysis of Middle Maithili archival literary texts, drawing sustenance principally from my own archival linguistic research publications. And I refer you to my work, Yara 2004, 2011, 2018, 2020, 2021, and I don't want to advertise myself. And peripherally, from the collated data culled from an assortment of related publications in Germany, India, Nepal, and Japan, during my 3.5 decades long research work, intermittently carried out at a number of universities in Germany during the span of 1983 through 2018 as senior visiting research fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung Bonn, Germany, to which grateful acknowledgement is now made. Ladies and gentlemen, my odyssey of a medievalist began with a serendipitous rendezvous with Mr. Prem Bahadur Kasa, a Newar scholar, some 40 years ago in 1980, when he confided to me to have had in his private possession a huge quantity of Newari manuscripts that he could read with ease but not quite comprehend. You know why? Because they were in Maithili. Mr. Kasa was kind enough to allow me to get a photocopy of the hand-copied Newari manuscript of a medieval Maithili play called Parshuramo Pakhyana by King Bhupatindra Malla of Bhakta Kapoor under his possession against payment, and I might here against a hefty payment that I made to him, thereby enabling me to learn to decipher the Newari script, leading to presentation of a preliminary account of the characteristics of the written text of that medieval Maithili play to the Literary Association of Nepal as early as 18 April 1982, and the eventual publication of a facsimile critical edition of that play, and I refer you to my work 2011. My passion for scientific linguistic analysis of Middle Maithili archival text has remained unabated ever since, and I have published later year of 2018, year of 2021, etc. Today's presentation is in essence a culmination of my earnest endeavor to incessantly and assiduously seek to retrieve, create, analyze, classify, assimilate, and disseminate newer and yet newer knowledge coded in the precious Newari manuscripts of the Maithili language archived in the Nepal Rashtriya Abhilekhalaya in Kathmandu. The purposes of my paper are threefold. One, to delve deeply into historical, political, cultural, and linguistic factors leading to mutual benefits that have accrued to the deft craft of Middle Maithili dramaturgy and versification from the effects of, and I quote, a new symbiosis of power and knowledge, Thomas Research, 1993, in his famous book, The Imperial Archive, or an intense interaction of Rajya, which is the state of being or function of the king, and Kavya, Rajya and Kavya. I borrow these phrases from Selden Pollock's 2006 famous book, The Language of Gods in the World of Men, that you might have heard. Or still alternatively put, a synergy of working together by the Newari-speaking royal men of letters and the Sanskrit-knowing Maithili-speaking Brahmins migrating from the south, seeking shelter and gold and glory, and later resident as what they call in Newari, Juju Baje, king of priests in the royal courts of the medieval Nepal. Two, to cursorily survey practically all published manuscripts of Maithili plays and songs across the globe to date. And thirdly, to carve out a sketch of a linguistic description of Middle Maithili based on gleanings from the hand-copied Newari manuscripts of medieval Maithili dramas and lyrical and devotional songs composed by the Nevar rulers of the Malla dynasty, hoping that in addition to preserving the ancient national heritage, the synchronic description will lay a firm foundation for comparative historical linguistic and typological analyses of Maithili vis-a-vis the other New Indo-Aryan languages of India and Nepal, and establish the nexus of diachronic and synchronic linguistics. Before moving further, I deem it both proper and apt to take a sneak peek into the number of such manuscripts of dramas and verse compositions. How many are there, after all? Although no two researchers came to agree on the precise number of Maithili manuscripts stored and preserved in the National Archives of Nepal. I refer you to some eminent. An eminent Indian scholar, Jayakant Mishra, 1960, reports, this is the edition of Dhurt Samagam. You might have heard of it, if not seen the book. Reports that in all, and I quote, as many as 300 old manuscripts in Maithili, unquote, are found to have been stored in the National Archives of Nepal. Horst Brinkhaus, 1987, a German Indologist, refers to some 150 Newari and or Mitlakshara hand-copied manuscripts. While the eminent archaeologist from Nepal, Taranand Mishra, 2005-2015, claims of the existence of some 400 manuscripts, including a rare gem, and this might be news to you, a rare gem of a hand-copied manuscript of none other than Vidyapati's Vaidya. No one knew about it before. Okay? A treatise on Ayurveda. Those who are medical scientists, I met one ophthalmologist earlier, he might take an interest in editing this book. Okay? Vaidya Rahasya in the Asa Archives, Kesar Library, and the Nepal Asa Archives. In a separate count, Kamal Prakash Malla, through a personal communication in an email in 2012, had guesstimated that the manuscripts of a total of 153 dramas, 26 to 30 in Newari, 5 to 6 in Bangla, Brajbhasha, Avadhi, Hindi, actually it's not Hindi, everybody knows that it's Brajbhasha or Avadhi, and if you don't mind my saying, Hindi seems to have devoured these two languages, which is very sad. And more than 115 in Maithili. And a host of collections and or anthologies of Maithili and Newari verse compositions were stored and preserved in the archive. Indeed, in my opinion, there are plenty more discoveries to be waiting to be unearthed. Sadly, only an infinitesimal number of these manuscripts have seen the light of the day till today across the globe. I'll tell you how many of them are being found. Kindly bear with me, I'll be speaking at least for an hour. Okay? It's going to be long. August Conradi, 1891, a German, was the first scholar ever to publish a German edition of a Maithili, and I'll say come Bengali. Ramana Raman may have disagreements with me because he is described it as a Maithili work, which is of course wonderful. Drama, Harishchandra Nityam, I'll talk about it later. Ascribed to King Siddhi Narasimha Malla of Patan under the rather confusing and somewhat ambiguous title of, if you know some German, Das Harishchandra Nityam, ein altnepalisches Tanzspiel. Das, as you all know, Das Kapital is a neuter gender sort of article, the, okay? Harishchandra Nityam is the play. Ein is a, one, okay, in German. Alt is old. Nepalese is Nepali, okay, of Nepali. And Tanz is drama. Spiel is a play, dance play, okay? But it is not a dance play of old Nepali. It comes from Nepal, but it is not a Nepali. It's a Maithili word. That's why the ambiguity, the confusion. Govindha 2005 in a very famous article called Harishchandra Nityama Bhasha has argued, has very conclusively demonstrated that despite the, this is in a book called Akita Lok that was published earlier, he has demonstrated that despite the copious use of the Bengali language in it, the play Harishchandra Nityam ought to be treated as a work of Maithili and not of Bengali. That's Govinda. With due permission, the East India Company government of the Bengal presidency then, and under the sponsorship of the Asiatic Society of Bengal, Mahamahopadhyaya Haraprasad Shastri, a renowned scholar from Bengal, traveled to Nepal twice and to Benares once, some in search of rare Sanskrit manuscripts, and I refer you to Shastri 1905, 1911. Soon thereafter, a number of eminent Bengali scholars, with Nani Gopal Bandyopadhyaya 1917, Prabodh Chandra Bagchi 1940, and Vijit Kumar Datta 1980, published a total of 5 medieval Maithili plays from Nepal, sadly, inadvertently mistaking a number of them as Bengali plays. They are actually Maithili, some of them. A number of Maithili-speaking scholars of Bihar too followed suit. Jayakant Mishra 1965, Leknath Mishra 1972, and Ramdev Jha, of all the persons, edited more books, 1970, 76, 1988, and the latest 2013. Published a total of 6 Maithili plays from medieval Nepal. Fort Springhouse 1987, as I told you, a German, published an English edition of Jagat Prakash Malla's play Pradyumna Vijaya, while Ramavtar Yadav 2011 published a facsimile edition along with the Devanagari and Roman transliterations and English translation of Upatindra Malla's play Parshurama Arcana. And if I'm not advertising myself, I'm not asking you to buy it. This is how the book looks. Okay? Just thought I should give you an idea. In the meantime, Makoto Kitada, 2014, 2015, a naturally of Japan, published a Japanese edition along with a Roman transliteration of Jagat Jyotir Malla's play Madhavasa Harana in 2 installments in the Osaka University Journal called, if I may read my Japanese expression like Indo-Miso Bukenkyu, roughly translated as Indian Folk Culture Research, okay, in that journal. Lately, Ramanand Raman, as I told you, our distinguished chairman here, 2019, has published a Maithili edition of the play Harishchandra Natyam in Ranchi, Jharkhand. Thus, of around 150 Maithili plays ascribed to the Nevartins of the Malla dynasty, altogether a total of near 13 plays, 13 plays, are published to date across the globe. Moving on to the genre of medieval versification, Shailendra Mohan Jha, 1969, of India, was the first scholar ever to publish an assortment of Maithili songs by Siddhi Narasimha Malla under the title of Siddhi Narasimha Malla. In the same year, he also published a Devanagari version of a Tirhuta manuscript of Bhasha Geet Sangraha, containing a monograph of 68 songs of Vidyapati, along with references to poems of an assortment of contemporary medieval poets of North India and the Nepal Valley, in an article titled An Introduction to Bhasha Geet Sangraha, a new source of Vidyapati songs, in the Journal of the Bihar Research Society in Patna. 2 years later, Leknath Mishra, 1971, published in Mithila Bharati, Patna, an introductory article containing the Devanagari text of a total of 14 Maithili songs of Bhupatindra Malla. In the editorial to a journal called Maithili, published from the city of Biratnagar in eastern India, eastern Nepal, and now out of print, Prafulla Kumar Mohan, 1971, published a total of 3 rare Maithili songs preserved as in the same issue of the journal. Maithili Ramdev Jha, too, in 1971, published a highly scholarly article containing the Devanagari transliteration of a total of 18 rare songs of Jagat Prakash Malla and others. Sundar Jha Shastri of Nepal, 1972, published a collection of Maithili songs by Jagat Prakash Malla titled Nanartha Deva Devi Geeta Sangraha in a modest Maithili magazine called Phoolpath in Kathmandu. Durganatha Shrish of India published 50 Maithili songs of Jagat Jyotir Malla titled Nirmati Jagat Jyotir Malla Krita Geeta Panchashika. and so on. Jayamanta Mishra, 1977, also published a slim anthology of a total of 21 rare Maithili songs of Newar kings. Please don't go. You think the light's going to fade? Well, yes. His book was called Maithili Abhilekha Geetama. I'm skipping some. Lately, not very lately, it's 2018, Ramarkar Yadav had published a facsimile edition along with Devanagari and Roman transliterations and an English translation of Jagat Prakash Malla's collection of a total of 40 intensely elegiac and highly eulogistic and panegyric lyrical songs called Geet Panchaka under the title of Elegy Wraith. So Harar. So elegy written in a royal courtyard, a facsimile edition of Jagat Prakash Malla's Geet Panchaka, and this is published in Delhi, and this is how the book looks in a that exhibition. Quickly, I move on to the Nepal connection, the title. Historians and linguistic scholars of Nepal and India, and indeed across the globe, are puzzled about the preponderant use and spread of Maithili, an Indo-Aryan language, as a highly potent and robust means of literary expression in the territory of the Nepal Valley, where the rulers and the population spoke Newari, a Tibeto-Burman language, and wore different attire and had different dietary preferences and culinary culture. How come? Historians are puzzled. I'm going to talk a little bit about the historical, political, and linguistic reasons that led to the emergence of what I have dubbed the Nepal connection, as well as on the causation of a major language shift. And I hear Narayan Chaudhary working on language shift. I have to quickly paper, but I have to go back to it once again. Did you realize that the graphs shown, maybe you use different colors, but it's all blurred. So I had difficulty locating which graphs. I have to read it carefully. But anyway, it was a major work on language shift. But this has happened in the Nepal Valley, where Bengali, which was the language in vogue, secession of Bengali, the language in vogue, and the concept of Maithili as the preferred means of literary expression in medieval Maithili dramas and verses composed by rulers of Nepal. The Newar scholars of history on the one hand and other scholars of history on the other, and I'm sure some of you might be historians, Avnindra, of course, is one, I know that, are at loggerheads and tend not to see eye to eye on a number of historical events and or issues. Nonetheless, many historians of Nepal and India take the following events as a matter of true historical facts, and I share some of these incidents with you, and you can challenge me on that and provide more information if you have. One, a total of 2 occurrences of invasion by forces from Tirut. And don't be misled by this word, I only mean Simrongarh. So don't be very glorified that Tirut was the one which invaded Nepal. That was Simrongarh in 2019 and 1311 under Chandeshwar Thakura. He was the Sandhi Vigrahika, peace and war minister of the Karnataka king Harisimhadeva. Also, you might have heard Harisimhadeva of Simron. 2. The conquering of the territory of the Nepal Valley by Chandeshwar Thakura in 1314. If you rely on Ram Devdhar 1995, if he is correct. 3. The Muslim invasion of Sultan Ghayasuddin Tughlaq of Delhi on the Karnataka king Harisimhadeva of Simrongarh, and his subsequent death as a destitute in a place called Teen Patan near Rajagram in Golakha, en route to the Nepal Valley on, and I quote, Magha Shudi 1446, corresponding to 7th January 1326, unquote. If you trust Luciano Pettet, 1962, an Italian who published an article. Mewar Prince Prithviraj Malla, actually he was the founder king of the Malla dynasty, thereby causing to label the founder king of with the appellation of darling son-in-law, Jamarada, of the Maithili speaking king of Simrongarh, and the Mewars are not very happy with this appellation. They don't want their first king to be the son-in-law of the Maithili speaking king. Thus, commenting, hello, gentlemen, make no movement, either leave the hall or have a seat. Okay? Thus, commenting on the closer ties between Nepal and Tirut and the salutary impact of Tirut on the development of Nepali culture during the 14th century onward, Brinkhouse demonstrates how the Nepal Valley became, and I quote, the sanctuary of political refugees, Brahmins, Pandits, men of letters, etc., who, while coming from various parts of northern India, streamed by far in the largest numbers from the northern regions of Bihar and Bengal. You all know the story. In addition to the prestigious place of Maithili, owing to historical and familial relations between two royal seats of power, another scholar, an American who worked in Sweden, Stockholm, sadly is dead, a good friend of mine, William Smith, puts forth a fourth reason. Okay, he puts forth a number of linguistic reasons, citing preeminence and suitability of the Maithili language for its elevation to an enviable status of being the sole medium of literary expression in the Nepal Valley. And I quote William Smith. Maithili, however, had an established literary reputation. You will be very pleased to see how an American is speaking of Maithili in such glowing words. No Indian scholar has done that about Maithili. Okay? Maithili, however, had an established literary reputation, and the Vaishnava reformers immediately realized its advantages. It had great prestige, it was mellifluous, it was already associated with Krishna, thanks to Vidyapati, Radha Krishna, you know all that, all those leaders. And finally, by simplifying its grammar and equipping it with a more Sanskritized vocabulary, it could be made relatively intelligible to audiences in Assam and Bengal. Such is the power of Maithili. This, look at what he says, this proved a combination impossible to resist. Look at the power of these words. This proved a combination impossible to resist, and Maithili became a favored vehicle for literature in the great swathe of India stretching from Kathmandu to Puri. Can you believe it? This is an American scholar resident in Stockholm. Said, too bad he died early, he would have done more. All right. Now, one more thing, and then I finish this section. Post Brinkhouse adds another reason. Politics of language that we talk more about these days. Since the ancestry of the Malla king, Prithviraj Malla, was unknown, Brinkhouse discovers that his descendants, in particular King Jagat, this is the paper that came out in the Journal of American Oriental Society in 1991. He argued that Jagat Jyotir Malla traced back their own lineage to the Karnataka dynasty of Simroni. A Mewar ruler traces back his ancestry to a Karnataka king of Simroni. How about that? And consequently espoused Maithili as a literary court language. We'll talk about that a little later. In order to lend credence and legitimacy, these are my words, not his, to their rule. And let me read out parts of what he says, and I quote. The ancestry of the first Malla king, Sthitiraja Malla, was left out in a contemporary chronicle called Gopala Rajvanshali, and as it seems was concealed deliberately, he says. Later generations of Malla kings, however, felt embarrassed about the absence of any knowledge of their own genealogical origin. The more so as their claim to the throne was based on hereditary title. In order to delete the blemish, they traced their lineage back to the older, well-known Karnataka dynasty of Mithila. Horst Brinkhausen's assertion of the genealogical origins of Newar kings is totally corroborated by the text of Jagat Jyotir Malla's play, Mudita Kubalayas, that's the name of it, composed in 1628, wherein distinct references to the Surya Vamshi king Ramachandra of the kingdom of Ayodhya through the first Karnataka king, and I quote, Vamsachuramani Nandadeva, unquote, through the seventh Karnataka king, and I quote, Vamsashiromani Harisimhadeva, not Harasimhadeva. Okay, here in this play. On to the founder king of the Newar Malla dynasty, and I quote, Pratapaditya Sri Jaya Sthiti Malla Deva, the first ruler, and still further on to none other than, and I quote again, Niti Nipuna Taka Dika Sri Jagat Jyotir Malla Deva Maharaja Dhiraja, end quote, are cited in that play edited by Ram Dirja, published by Sahitya Akademi 2013. Okay, so I conclude that the politics of language thus entered the arena of the royal courts in Nepal as early as the 7th century. I move on to the main part of my paper, the structure of Middle East. Okay, I promised a linguistic analysis of Middle East. 1600 through 1769. That's the year Prithvinarayan conquered territory, and that's where the downfall of Newari and Maithili began, 1968. Let me begin with some preliminaries to give you the background. The historical linguistic analysis of the origins of Maithili is, in my opinion, at its best opaque and sketchy. No two historians of the Maithili language and literature tend to agree on the precise historical dates of division into literary periods. Indeed, they have their own preferred temporal boundaries and periodization to vouch for. Consequently, and quite understandably, therefore, the current practice of using such labels as Old Maithili, Middle Maithili, as I'm using myself, and Modern Maithili is at its best tentative and speculative, in my view. Maithili is believed to be a descendant of the, and I use the German expression, Ursprache, Adya Bhasha, Central Magadhi Prakrit, also called Upper branching off into West Avadhi Bhojpuri, Central Magahi Maithili Angika Kurmali, and East Bengali, Assamese, Oriya, New Indo-Aryan languages. And I refer you to this information. Kumar Ganganand Singh, 1950, Govind Jha, 1968, Tsuyoshi Nara, a Japanese scholar, 1979, and my good friend from Delhi University, Tanmay Bhattacharya, 2016. I'll tell you more about Tanmay Bhattacharya before long. However, to the best of my knowledge, no scientific study delineating the derivational history of modern Maithili from a specific Magadhi Prakrit or Vamsa work is available. Interestingly, Subhadra, a disciple of none other than Sunit Kumar Chatterjee, you all know about, and a doyen of Maithili linguistics, in his magnum opus, The Formation of the Maithili Language, 1958, some of you might have seen the word, tends to unabashedly frog leap from, I was going to say Hanuman leap, but I narrowed it down to frog leap, from the Hanuman Kud you all know about. From the old Maithili forms straight onto the modern Maithili, showing a total disregard to the existence of a vast body of Middle Maithili literary texts preserved in Nepal and Assam, as well as to the standard phonological rules of sound change that characterize the formation and evolution of the Neo-Indo-Aryan languages, including Maithili. Medieval Maithili literature composed in the Nepal Valley is typically characterized by such distinct features as one, language contact. Maithili came in contact with other Tibetan languages, as we have seen. Language contact. Two, multilingualism. For a different kind of multilingualism as a characteristic feature of the 15th century literary culture in North India, I refer you to Francesca Orsini, 2012, a German woman teaching Hindi in School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and Pankaj Kumar Jha, 2016, teaches history in Delhi. They talk about multilingualism of a different kind. Okay? And finally, south to north migration, as you have seen. I refer to you how these Brahmins migrated to the north. Okay. So I skip parts of it and I say that now I illustrate some features, some dominant sort of characteristic features of these manuscripts. Fortunately, there is no board here, whiteboard or anything when I need to explain things. This is the handicap of the fancy sort of all like this. Okay, I refer you to the script. That's the first thing you face as a researcher. Sorry, because the script is a different script, a Newari script. Okay, how does that script conspire to deftly and felicitously represent the sound system of the Maithili language? Now, this is a challenge we all researchers have to face. To an initiate, not fully conversant with, and not quite adept in reading the Nepala Khala, that is what the Nevars call their script, like you call yours. You don't have one, sorry. You don't have one word, you have Tirhuta and Lakshara, and God knows what else. They have one Nepala Khala, modern Nepali is Nepa Akha, and Sanskrit is Nepalakshara. This is very clear, Nepalakshara. That's the name of the script. And that's the script in which these manuscripts are written. Okay? No Indian scholar ever mentions which script of the Newari language were these plays written, which they have edited. Okay? Maybe they have no access to knowledge. They have no way to investigate that. So I kind of empathize with them. In particular, as I said earlier, with how to flawlessly decipher and to correctly interpret a host of intricate ways in which the graphemes and various, and I might add, curious combinations of diacritic and the matra of the Newari script conspire to deftly and felicitously represent the sound system of the Maithili language. And I give you some very quickly. Some of it you might be familiar with because you all know Sanskrit better than me. following the convention of the Sanskrit language, and I base myself on Whitney 1879, since I can learn about Sanskrit only through English and German. Everyone knows that after R, okay, represented as a race in the spelling system, a consonant is double. Okay? So these manuscripts also do. So when you have Sarva, you have a double law, okay, instead of just one. Arjuna, double jump. Okay? The rule applies. And so, occasionally, the convention is overgeneralized by the rule of analogy in linguistics, we say that, thereby resulting in an insertion of an intrusive R before double consonants where it doesn't belong, overboard. Okay, so for instance, Yuddha becomes Yurdha in many of these manuscripts. Chitta becomes Chitta. You have to know why this is happening, okay, as a reader. Another one. This is very familiar to you. Following the conventions of the Bangla script and also of the Lakshara script, the Newari script too uses a backstroke. Okay? Below the horizontal bar, what's called Shirorekha, and preceding a consonant to represent the vowel A. So you have Kama, and then this backstroke, and Hanu, and you have to read that Kama there. Okay? No upper stroke, but the backstroke. Okay, very common. This is common to you. The backstroke diacritic below the horizontal mark, together with the race-like, this is very confusing. The race-like diacritic above the consonant that represents the sound A. So what you have is here mo, go with a race-like thing. It's a fuzzy thing on the manuscript, chait, and you have to read it as mongai chait. Very hard to do. Very hard to do. So you have to be good at it. This is very common, a backstroke. So when the back vowel R comes, like you write ga kuladasa, but you have a backstroke, but you read that as go kuladasa. Okay? This sure, Himnati knows better than me. He knows Mithalakshara very well. But the most difficult law that I face, and many scholars do, is that they have a sort of tilde-like horizontal bar. Tilde is the sound that you use to denote nasalization in phonetics. Okay? Like this. Alright? And this is right on the Shirorekha, and so you don't know if it is a Shirorekha or that fuzzy little thing. So it is ha, and you have to read that A. Okay? It's very difficult. Similarly with na, Radha na, but because of that you have the Radha nu. Mind you, in those days, even a noun or even a pronoun, but a noun in this case, when it was used as a subject, then you had a subject mark. So you have Raja nu Ubati. All right. Modern Maithili doesn't have any subject mark. Raja Mazda, whatever. No mark. But you have the middle Maithili, you have such expressions available. So you can see how this language grew through ages, and an analysis of these pieces have to be made in detail. Finally, I mean, there are more difficult things. It was more problematic again to read. It is written like something like Ubha, but you have to read it Ubhau. Both. So, just a quick example. There are some particular pairs of consonant clusters that create real difficulty. So, Yo and Pa look alike. Cha and Ra alike. Cha and Ksha, of course, very difficult. And Da and the vowel letter U are the same. I don't know, even the Lakshara, I'm not an expert. So these are the difficulties. I wish Ramdev Jha or Salim Jha or Leknath Mishra had done it for me, so it would have been easier for me to do that. And since nobody has done it, I took the trouble to go through it for future sort of researchers, so they will have a good time. Finally, as opposed to the 8 vowel system of modern Maithili, and you have to believe me when I say there are 8 vowels, there are 8 vowels. As simple as that. Okay, it's all scientifically based in my work. I didn't bring those works here, but my book on Maithili phonetics and phonology, published in Germany as early as 1984. My grammar, a reference grammar of Maithili, published in Berlin and New York in 1996. They all talk about it. But Middle Maithili has only a 6-vowel system. So what happened to the other 2? And they are in the process of offing, growing, not fully stabilized. And here is an example, very quick example. These 2 vowels are a. So if you say ga, that a thing, and o. Okay? What really happens in the manuscript, so you have written like to, ekar, and punt. Not Chandrabindu, but Anuswar. Okay? So you will read that thing, but that's not what it is. Okay? You have to read that either. If you have chart here, I challenge you to listen to it very carefully. Ten and tan. Can you see the difference? Ten is higher, tan is low. So both tan and tan are emerging at that time. They are not taking full shape. So that's what you have. Similarly, you have jaw, yon, oka. You cannot read that jayon, no. That is zone. So yon and o constitute that o, zone. Okay? And more examples I don't want to do. Let me take some time to morphology, words of that time. Grammar, parts of it, quickly. We all know, and P.S. and Chatterjee, Dean was the smartest. He knew it very well. They have all made unequivocal claims about an early loss of the grammatical category of number in the Magadhan language, Maithili and Bangla. Modern Maithili has no number. Even if you hit your head against the wall to tell me that there is a plural form, you know how to make a plural of it, but that's not a grammatical plural. Think about it. It's a semantic plurality there. And I'll tell you how the semantics of plurality works then in Middle Maithili, all right? Or even in Modern Maithili, which I've already written. So, but this loss of number gave rise to an unusually complex set of honorificity distinctions in its pronominal and verbal morphology. And that's what makes Maithili a unique language, entirely different from Hindi. This one point proves that Hindi never was, Maithili never was, never will be. I don't want to repeat the whole story, a dialect of so-called Hindi. It never is. The grammar mitigates against it, vehemently. And those who know the language well will always say so. All right? Because Maithili, the verbal morphology is very complex. And I have no relics of the old Maithili or ancient Maithili traces. In old Maithili, there was grammatical language. Okay, so how does Middle Maithili do it? So this is the semantics of plurality, as I say, is conveyed by agglutination of a number of periphrastic words, periphrastic words indicative of multitude. That's not plural, multitude, or even aggregate to the noun phrase, okay, or pronoun. So here are some very quick examples. Sava, Jana, Loka, Ad, Gana or Gana. These all mean different things, all indicated plurality. So I have a few examples. Pautra Sava, literally all the Pautras, but it would translate as grandsons in English. Okay, but it means all. Mriga Sukaradi. Okay, so Gaini Lokake. Okay, so on and so forth. Let me come to gender very quickly. Grammatical gender, you all know modern Maithili has no gender. Absolutely no grammatical difference. Being one Safa, low that means natural gender. The Purukh says a Purukh, the Mahila says a Mahila. But no grammatical, Shastriya name. Okay, in his Maithili Bhasha, was built in 1946. That's what he said. Grammatical gender of nouns does not seem to exist in Middle Maithili either. Only the natural gender of tense. But traces of OIA, Old Indo-Aryan gender system, remain in particular in adjectives, okay, pronominal adjectives, genitival adjectives, and past and future. I'll give you some examples. And modern Maithili also has those remnants even now. So you have, for instance, Shashi Mukhi, this E at the end. All right? I translate as moon face. Manoranjini Cha. And I give a gloss here, but meaning. Kanistha, a Navar writer, Kanistha. So for that is Kanistha. All right? The Julia Queen. Okay? Tohara Pita, Tohari Mata. Very clear. Even now, some scholars would like to do that. You don't have to do it. Modern Maithili, you don't have to do it, but it's of course a habit to those Sanskrit scholars to kind of superimpose the Sanskritic gender system to Maithili as well. All right, you don't have to do it. That ruins the Maithili language. Some more examples, very interesting answer. Se binu mahitara puralihu nor. Nora is used as a feminine gender here. All right. So I translate that. Suddenly the sky was without him, saying, without him, I filled the earth with my tears. These are verse lines I translate. Okay. Look at some tense and person, and I'll appreciate it very quickly. Ki bahut kahini kare tha. That's the text. This is non-honorific. What idle conversations do you make? Chara, stop. That's how I translate. Okay. Hey Muniraj, ki agya kare chiya. Now that's honorific. Chiya is honorific. Cha is non-honorific. Even in Middle. Just a few examples. Now, I want you to draw your attention to why this sudden complexity of verbal morphology emerged. I try to answer that question in my own way, okay, in my grant, 1996. And this is what I came up then, all right? No, this is in a further later book, when I was analyzing the language of Parashurama Upakhyan in 2011. Allow me to read a long quote of mine. The question is, please pay attention to this. The question is, how is it that in works produced by kings and their priest scholars in the Nepal Valley, a codification of a complex verbal morphology occurs? How come? The answer to the question may be had in the sociology of language use, I said. During 16th to 18th century, Maithili was a court language, a language of royal communication, a language of prestige and high esteem. And at the same time, it was an potent means of literary expression in the Nepal Mandal. Maithili was being used in the royal courts of the Malwa kings of Nepal under highly formal and even formulaic circumstances by elites and courtiers of varying cadre and states. No wonder an element of highly codified form of deference and courtesy and honor was superimposed on the verbal basis in order to distinctly stratify the status of members of the royal court vis-a-vis the other users or consumers like you and me of this language. Okay? Maithili was, after all, a language of kings and queens, of princesses and princesses, of elites and courtiers, and of high priests, all born from Sri mainly, and scholarly pundits. This perforce led to emergence of an immaculate form of language fit to suit the royal purposes, while at the same time, probably less dignified varieties, i.e. the colloquial varieties of Maithili, coexisted elsewhere in Nepal and India, and this is what the linguists later called diglosia. So diglosia was evident in much earlier in 16th century, in the case nobody had studied diglosia in Maithili. They have studied in Bengali as far as I know. But very interesting piece of further research. Taking cue from my scientific linguistic description of multiple agreements in modern Maithili, 1996, as well as from my descriptive account of agreement in the archival literary text of Maithili, as epitomized in my works, my friend and a good friend from Delhi, as I told you, Tanmay Bhattacharya of Delhi University, has taken upon himself the onerous task of exploring the contact-induced changes caused by contiguous languages such as Santhali, Khadija, and a host of other less known, less dignified, less studied languages of the Munda family of the Northeast India. I also draw attention to a sort of scholar from Amsterdam, the Vries, 1962, very early. But more prominently by the Tibeto-Burman language, that is the Mewari of the valley, and Rai, Limbu, and other Kirati languages of eastern Nepal in the marginal language Maithili, leading to sudden emergence of a plethora of complex honorificity markers in the word paradigm in the post-Vidyapati Maithili of the Brahmanic speech community, and where Vidyapati's time no such complexity existed in this time. Okay? Actually, Bhattacharya very recently gave a talk at the CIIL on the inauguration day, where he talks about the stories about the Maithili. We should all be thankful to this Bengali scholar that he's taking the pains to do it. So, in my opinion, I say, as a matter of fact, Tanmay Bhattacharya is striving hard to put together an integrated and synthesized version of the stories. I take from his title, he sent me a copy of his talk, of multiple agreement systems of Maithili in a clear historical and theoretical perspective. I'm also reminded of another friend of mine, a good old friend, but we never meet, Uday Naran Singh. He wrote a very interesting paper as early as 1989, published in the Journal of the Sociology of Language in Europe, and the paper was simply called How to Honor Someone in Maithili. I want you to go through that paper if you haven't already. Very quickly, I look at, just to entertain you, I give you some, and then I finish with some kind of courses. I give you some examples of sentences, sentence structure, declarative, very simple words. Reva, Nadi, Pahuch Lao. This is what Maithili was like. Pahuch Lao, nahi. Pahuch Lao. Okay? Reva, Nadi, Pahuch Lao. Which is very simple. You all know the meaning. Tohe Minu Hame Nahi Parava Samhari. That's from a first word that I edited in 2018. And I say, without you, I can no longer control. I give the gloss there in this imperative, very interesting. Ehan Agya Janu Kariya. Okay? Imperative. Hame Janu Bisara. The question. Okay? Interrogative. Naparab Parabhav Kya Gumane. This is interrogative sentence. Kya Surmane. This is of course the kind of one. Why shall I not crush your pride? Is my translation. Ehana Priya Saki Katahu Gaili Abe. This is also an interrogative. where did such a dear friend suddenly go away? That book that I referred to you, the elegy one, the king wrote an elegy because his Maithili speaking friends Chandrasekhar Simmata. And so that is a shok geet in honor of Chandrasekhar Simmata. Very powerful song here. Okay? Okay, very good. Now I come to the end, and this part you might like. Very entertaining part. I call that some kind of postscript. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, for your diversion's sake, I beg to draw your attention to a set of two significant trends that have emerged under the circumstances. Okay, what did I notice in all this? One, the universities, the academies, and the research centers of Nepal, and I might add India, the so-called knowledge-producing regimes, sadly appear to be quite indifferent to the existence of the vast wealth of knowledge and cultural heritage enshrined in the handwritten manuscripts of a wide variety of languages of Nepal and India. You may be surprised to note that to date, only a total of mere three Prakrit Sanskrit grammatic works of medieval Nepal are published by these organizations. Only three. One, the Lalitpur poet Darbhanga's Prakrit Sanskrit play, some of you might have heard, I'm sure Bhimnathji knows about it, Ramanukanatika, might have read it in the history book, composed in the Bhuji Mol Nevari script, which is very difficult to read. There are very few readers of that script. Now they are all there. Okay, this was composed in 1381 and most likely staged to celebrate the solemn occasion of the establishment of the newly founded kingdom of Lalitpur, as well as Jayasimha Malla's accession to the throne as the first crown king of Lalitpur was edited with a Nepali translation by Govinda Prasad Bhattarai and published by the Royal Nepal Academy. Okay, the first two by this academy in 1975. 8 years later, poet playwright Jayak's Prakrit play, you might have heard the name, Mahiravan, okay, composed much earlier, again in the Bhujimol script, in 1337, was edited with a translation into Nepali by Gyan in Nepal and published by the Tripura University Research Center for Nepal and Asian Studies, called the CNAS, in 1983, and I'm very proud to report that in my younger days, I used to be the deputy director of this research center. All right, so I take pride in the fact that this center has produced one. Another Prakrit play, Bhairavananda, of the Maithili-speaking poet, believe it or not, Mani, written in Manikya Vardhana, Sanskrit, and or Mani also, or Manaku in vernacular, that means Maithili, and composed in the Bhujimol script in 1383, and staged on the auspicious occasion of King Jayasthiti Malla's son Prince Dharma Malla's wedding ceremony, but also edited with a translation into Nepali along with a gloss of Prakrit words into Sanskrit and Nepali. Of Vijay Mala was published by. Not many books, such books are published by academy or university here also. Secondly, another very interesting factor, a closer look at who are these creatures who become editors to these books, like me or Raman Haran, whoever. So a closer scrutiny of the editor scholars and the manuscripts that are selectively chosen for publication to date reveals a distinct ethnocentric segregation. It's sad. Strict, distinct ethnocentric segregation. I'll tell you what. For instance, the Bengali editor scholars of India tend to produce only the Bengali editions of either Bengali or Maithili. Okay? The Maithili-speaking editor scholars of India and Nepal tend to produce the Maithili editions of Maithili and or Prakrit Sanskrit works. And I have here in my mind Jayakant Mishra and Shashina Jha. I prefer to go to Australia. Only occasionally do they publish their English editions, like the others have 1954, Vidyapati, some other songs of Vidyapati, published by Motilal Banarsi Das when this was still in Banaras, not in Delhi, very early. And Jayakant Krishna 1960, Guru Samaj. And of course, Rama Paryada 2011. So these are the only four texts in English by these Maithili speaking. No one. I'm talking about manuscripts, all right? The Newari literary scholars mostly and quite understandably produce the Newari editions of Newari works. Only with the singular exception of a young scholar called Rajiv Bahadur Shrestha, who published in 2004 a Newari edition of a Maithili play, which unfortunately turned out to be a Bengali. So I had to tell him, thank you, but this is Bengali. All right? He mistakenly called it Maithili. Fine. Interestingly, the Nepali-speaking editor scholars of the Brahmin caste end up producing the Nepali editions of the Prakrit and Sanskrit works alone. Why? May I ask? Or Ramanandi can guess. For the very simple reason, because the Nepali manuscripts of the Malla dynasty are virtually non-existent. Works began to be written in Nepali only after Prithvi Narayan took over. So they don't have more literature like Maithili had or Newari has. And yet Nepali, is the national language. All right. Having said so, having analyzed all this, let me mention in the defense of the editor scholars, and I empathize with them, that the scholarly act of critically editing a trilingual Newari manuscript of the Malla dynasty turns out to be a stupendously arduous task. Very difficult. The job is very difficult. And I wrote about it in a paper published in Maithili in 2019, and this is what I say. Allow me to read this last quote of mine in Maithili. Muda aj ikaz ati kastasadhya. Editing of a manuscript. हस्तलिखित पांडुलिपि सबक समीक्षात्मक संस्करण कार्य आसान नहीं है। एक कार्य सफल संपादन हेतु कठोर परिश्रम, अदम्य साहस, दीर्घकाल. It took me 20 years to edit the first one. 20 years. Can you imagine? दीर्घकाल, गहन गवेषण, त्रिभाषा ज्ञान, संस्कृत नेवारी, and of course Maithili, ऐतिहासिक एवं पुरातात्विक ज्ञान, more importantly, सही लिप्यंतरण क्षमता. Very sorry to say, Eknath Mishra's book is under severe attack by German scholars. He got his manuscript from Cambridge University and he was unable to read the manuscript illicitly. So many errors have been pointed out and I don't want to go into it. Of course, Ramdev Babu personally, in my meetings with him, acknowledged कि अपने के किताब सेट कर देते तो हमसे त्रुटि क्या नेवारी शब्द अर्थ नहीं जानो इससे हम कल I am so it's very important सही लिप्यंतरण क्षमता पद विच्छेद करवाक सामर्थ्य because they are all connected in the manuscript. अनुवाद कौशल this is very important. प्रतिलिपिकार जन्म त्रुटि विश्लेषण और नेवार से लिखा वाला तो वो अपना भाषा जरा कनिष्ठा कही है तो तकरा यदि कनिष्ठा पढ़ रहे तो नहीं है आज गुण सबक खट्टा पढ़े थे ये समस्त गुण सबक समझती उन्हें एक विद्वान व्यक्ति ने नहीं हो बस सके जाए ऐसे आई है में एक काल में विद्वत समुदाय and I put a team of scholars सहभागिता प्रयोजनीय नहीं अपितु अपरिहार्य देखना चाहिए. That is what I said. Finally, paragraph. Finally, and to conclude, taking cue from Leonard Bloomfield's insightful observation cited prior to the onset of the paper, I wish to exhort the young and not so young linguistic scholars and cultural historians possessing knowledge of languages such as Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Tibetan, Bengali, Maithili, and Newari to join hands together to devote their time and synergy to the study, analysis, and eventual publication of facsimile critical editions of the precious hand-copied manuscripts of all languages archived in the Nepal National Archives or any other archives for that matter in Nepal and India. Such acts of research publication will not only promote and foster the preservation of ancient national heritage and facilitate creation as well as dissemination of valuable new knowledge enshrined in the precious manuscript, but also conclusively allay, for instance, Govind's anguish over the native scholars' avarice for a few silver coins. But Cody, you know that. As well as Shashinath Jha's justified fear, nay, and I borrow a German word, Angst, Trust, of the sudden loss and disappearance of the highly invaluable manuscripts under mysterious circumstances in India, so admirably and bitterly expressed in the excerpt cited in the medium of the Maithili language on the top of the paper. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention. Thank you.
धन्यवाद सर। अवसर सर नेपाल तिब्बत पांडुलिपि में मैथिली स्वरूप पर चर्चा करें। अब हम प्रोफेसर गिरीशनाथ झा के आमंत्रित करै छियै। गिरीशनाथ झा देश विदेश में अध्ययन कयलाक बाद संप्रति जवाहरलाल नेहरू विश्वविद्यालय नई दिल्ली में अध्यापन कार्य कर रहल छथि। हुनक मिथिलाक्षर के संगे संग शारदा लिपि पर सेहो विशेषज्ञता हासिल भेल छै। एहि संदर्भ में बहुत कार्य कयने छथिन। शताधिक शोध आलेख प्रकाशित छै। स्प्रिंगर और कैम्ब्रिज तमाम अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संस्था सबसे हम आमंत्रित कर रहल छियनि आदरणीय गिरीशनाथ झा सर। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। हम अभिभूत छी एठाम के दरभंगा ललित विद्यालय और अमृतसर विश्वविद्यालय संस्कृत विभाग में छी। संस्कृत विश्वविद्यालय दरभंगा में LNMU में हमारे पिताजी कार्य करे चला संस्कृत प्रोफेसर है और ये कई उम्र आए मगर so honored to be here and especially with Professor Rawat Yaduji and Ramanand Saji. I just met them. But in the Salamake, I was especially intrigued by the Middle Maithili's absence of two vowels, the lower front lower a and a. They later emerged. Very nice observations. हम जो प्रेजेंट कर रहल छी संगणकीय भाषा विज्ञान के करंट ट्रेंड्स की सब छे और कोना ई विषय कयल जाय मैथिली भाषा में ई सब काज भ रहल है, सब काज भ चुकल है, आगू की भस कहते हैं टेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़ा बहुत जरूरी है, बिना टेक्नोलॉजी जुड़ा बिना टेक्नोलॉजी के कोई भाषा सर्वाइव नहीं कर सकती। मैथिली would be a good example. Generally, जो इलेक्शन हम सब काज करें छी, typically गोल ई छै कि कंप्यूटर से हमर सहज संवाद हो, कंप्यूटर से संवाद। जैसे typical methods से कीबोर्ड के, माउस के वो रिप्लेस हो जाए स्पीच से। तो वास्ते स्मार्ट आईओ मैकेनिज्म होना चाहिए कि हम भाषा में इनपुट दी, भाषा में इनपुट पावे कंप्यूटर से। इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया। उनमें the language probably we have to tag text, जे भाषा के जे संपदा छै, सामग्री छै, ओकरा हम ऑटोमेटिकली टैग कर सकते हैं, ताकि मशीन रिकॉग्नाइज कर ले कि नाउन्स की छै, प्रोनाउंस की छै, कते वर्ड अपियर भरल छै। फिर शब्द की व्याख्या बनाओ मॉर्फोलॉजी के अंदर, शब्द देना मशीन एनालिसिस करना। फिर नॉर्मली पार्सिंग फुल सेंटेंस के पार्ट्स में फुल सेंटेंस की व्याख्या हो। These were the classical methods in NLP. Now they're replaced by machine learning. I'll talk about that. अब स्पीच वगैरह के टेक्नोलॉजी के से बड़े स्पीच रिकग्निशन पर कि हम आज ये मशीन टाइप कर दिए। यह पूछा कि हम क्या बात कर रहे हैं स्पीकर के सुनो पर सिक्योरिटी में खास कर। उसके बाद जब लिखा है तो मशीन पढ़ लिया ऑटोमेटिक स्पीच सिंथेसिस शुरू। अनुवाद का बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट शास्त्र जानना चाहिए कि अनुवाद का मशीन अनुवाद के बिना किसी भारत से गया यहाँ तक मैथिली के मशीन अनुवाद अवेलेबल नहीं है। कुछ कंपनी हम दावा चाहिए कि भाषा की एक अगला 6 महीना में माइक्रोसॉफ्ट बिंग रिलीज करें मर्स के एफर्ट्स से। तो we've done that before with them English to Urdu machine translation for Bing. Now we are doing English to Maithili. That might be cross-lingual information access is very important. So like mind लिया हम सर्च कर रहे हैं मैथिली में बस सर्च करें। अब मैथिली में टेक्स्ट नहीं चाहिए, इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं चाहिए। तो कंप्यूटर की तरह हमारे इनपुट के क्वेरी के अंग्रेजी में या हिंदी में अनुवाद करके वही में सर्च करें। जिस सामग्री उपलब्ध है फिर अनुवाद करके मैथिली में देखा। इंटरनेट पर सब भाषा में समान सामग्री हुए आवश्यक नहीं चाहिए, संभव नहीं हो सकती। जे भाषा में कम सामग्री है वो भाषा के डेटा प्राप्त कर सकते हैं क्रॉस लिंगुअल इंफॉर्मेशन एक्सेस। जो ऑटोमेटिक लोकलाइजेशन अब मान लीजिए कि सॉफ्टवेयर की इंटरफेस ना की पावरपॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशंस की अगर इंटरफेस मैथिली में भाषा के अब जे भाषा में डेटा छिपे लेकर क्या लोकलाइजेशन पे इंपॉर्टेंट रोल क्या तरह के लोकलाइज डेटा पब्लिश किया जाएगा हर भाषा का मैथिली के लोकलाइज डेटा सीधा जीटीएल प्रोजेक्ट से पब्लिश कर लिया तो पे डेटा कंप्यूटर डोमेन के डेटा तो मैं ठीक है समझा कि जब we have parallel dictionary file English से हिंदी से मैथिली भाग गया सब भाषा भाग गया and the software picks up data from that file to show the interface। फिर टेक्स्ट की समरी बनाना। हम मान लीजिए कि बहुत बड़ी टेक्स्ट दिया हम सर्च करो इंटरनेट पर तिरुता लिपि के बारे में एक पेज के हमारा इंफॉर्मेशन आ गया। हमारा अगर समरी है I do not read the whole text. The machine can summarize. It's also very important. Name identity. ये नाम मुझे अब टेक्स्ट में नाम आया है, तो नाम पे मशीन अपने आप पकड़ लिया। The names are the semantic load. They carry semantic loads. It's very important to have names. अब I can not carry that. Why I'm saying how are these done today? Computational linguistics में बहुत परिवर्तन हुए हैं over the years. 50s के बाद से now actually late 90s onwards they moved to machine learning eventually. हमसे basically आगे query की थी तीन तरह के data collection करे थी unimodal text data, bimodal speech data, and multimodal video data movement. So we collect data from three domains, three kinds of data, and then annotate it. So हमसे वास्ते annotate करें मतलब कि डेटा में पहले से जे सूचना से इंफॉर्मेशन like part of speech है आर्गुमेंट इंफॉर्मेशन से जुड़ा हुआ fact acquisition. In the text data set, the grammar information, speech data set, stress के accent की information होता है किसी को, logic information होता है किसी को, और in the video set अगर all information fact है किसी. There are a lot of software, speech editing software which है video के software which है हाँ video software में video file को edit करो, हाँ like for example face के recognition चाहिए, face recognition चाहिए, तो हम कौन moment करे कौन emotion हुई, ऐसे कि एंग्री मूड, ये सब पे हम फेस के एडिट कैसे करें, फेस के वीडियो कॉल पे वहां हम इमेज के टैग कैसे करें, वीडियो के टैग कैसे करें, and then machine can be trained with recognize. गूगल लेंस आंसर सर्च देखते हैं, गूगल लेंस आप पॉइंट करो तो बता देगी कौन फूल कौन फल, तो दे आर ट्रेन ऑन दैट. ओकर बाद then we train pre-existing algorithms. And earlier we used to do statistical machine learning, now we have deep machine learning. हमें क्या करना चाहिए कि algorithm बढ़ी, algorithm का हम annotated data supervised learning के तहत देशी ढेर सारा, and then machine is gradually feeding on the data and machine is trained, machine learn करेगा, artificial learning, and then machine is considered has picked up that pattern from that data. और तब ना machine का दे raw picture दे raw text दे machine अपना भूल जाए. And basically the constant need for updating the grammar and lexicon is not there anymore. What we have to do is to provide data constantly. New data has to be provided with annotation. The machine has to learn automatically. And alternatively, what we can do, हम सब hybridize कर सकते हैं. We use a classical method of grammar and lexicon with the machine learning portion of the language model and then hybridize it. That also works. AI has been very uncertain because I remember doing a course in Introduction to Artificial Intelligence at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in 1997. And that course was Introduction to Prolog and Lisp. Introduction to AI course basically is Prolog programming and Lisp programming. You are using. Now, if you do a course in AI, it will be machine learning and deep machine. There's been a significant change in AI. आगे की चेंज है कुछ क्लियर नहीं, डेटा में बहुत चेंज आ रहा है, जिधर डेटा एंट्री पे ऐप है, हाँ जी, chaotic crazy डेटा है उनसे ना, short forms ऐप है, बहुत तरह की मिक्सिंग बाहर आ रही है, मैथिली में, I'm speaking Maithili, lot of English speaks in Maithili, language switch, language shift, बहुत तरह चीज बाहर आ रहा है, crazy data, crazy technology and crazy situations. So we don't know where we are moving to. So very good answer. But 2000 onwards, जब web app दे रही है, data के बहुत busy availability web पर है, the machine learning is a very practical methodology in this area. आजकल जो है technology जब हम अपनी भाषा ना बढ़ा भी, for example मैथिली हम technology निर्माण कर रहे हैं, तो किस सब प्रक्रिया involve है? Normally, आपकी कैसी सबसे पहले क्योंकि we are in a data-driven technology era. We first have to create lot of data. Resource बनाना जरूरत पड़ेगी. Resource बनाने से पहले हमारा मानक बनाना पड़ेगा, मानक standards. If you create resources without standards, those resources will be not used for the job. हमारे का मानक निर्माण करना पड़ेगा. मानक निर्माण के बाद कॉर्पोरा बनाना पड़ेगा. वो कॉर्पोरा के annotate करो, तक हमारा समझ में लगेगा. अब जे भाषा में कॉर्पोरेट नहीं है, वो हमारे से लोकलाइज करना है. नजदीक की भाषा से हिंदी से अंग्रेजी से बांग्ला से या फिर ट्रांसलेट जो मैथिली then create करना है, right? उसके बाद टेक्नोलॉजी निर्माण, फिर सॉफ्टवेयर टूल बना, ऐप बना टेक्नोलॉजी से, then we have to make sure that community knows technology है. For example, मैथिली के predictive keyboard है मोबाइल फोन में. हाँ सब क्या लोग इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं मैथिली के predictive keyboard? Anybody using मैथिली predictive keyboard on mobile phone? Swift key के, तो हम सब बना रहे हैं Swift key के predictive keyboard. जब टेक्नोलॉजी निर्माण भर जाएगा, तो हमारे सबको पता होगा कि टेक्नोलॉजी ये है कि कौन इस्तेमाल करेगा, right? That has to be done. But the focus has shifted to machine learning based algorithms completely. And the available platform के लिए क्या तरह के platform में जो those of you who are
technically savvy and want to do this, ये सब आप देख सकते हैं open NLP है, NLTP है, open machine translation, BERT, Guri, Indian NLP, and what's happened ICIN platform here to create resources in a collaborative fashion. Indian language corporate annotation platform. The last one I JNU here, Narayan Jain, we work together on that, and that can be used to create resources for Maithili also, right? And government India must have project Maithili only, we cannot add Maithili there. The remaining platforms here, that by Google, Microsoft, and other big guys are actually creating their own platforms and making these available for cloud. Cloud logging data upload, you can train a model, and then that model can be used to bootstrap, create more data. Now, what I'm doing actually, given the current scenario, the latest trends in computational linguistics, what is happening in Maithili? Maithili के वास्ते क्या बाहर है? Next. हम just survey कर basically speech technology, language technology. Speech technology means speech processing only, speech parsing and speech generation. Language technology basically analysis, language के हम data और generation, machine के बाद finally resource creation, सबसे important resource creation. अब जो automatic speech recognition है और text to speech है, अगर हम survey करना चाहिए, next please. The सबसे important area critical for speech to speech machine translation systems. अगर जो भारत सरकार के national language translation mission है 500 crores के, and also in the committee. हम ये कि हम speech हम बाजी और हम सुनो दूसरा भाषा. हम अंग्रेजी बाजी शी हम मैथिली में सुनो, हम मैथिली बाजी हम अंग्रेजी में सुनो. इस तरह की possibility टेक्नोलॉजी में भाषा की है, अगर वास्ते भारत सरकार बहुत बेसिक फंडिंग अवेलेबल कर रही है. लेकिन हमें स्पीच टेक्नोलॉजी चाहिए. हम जो भाषा मैथिली में पूरा पहले मशीन टाइप करना, वो टाइप टेक्स्ट के तहत ट्रांसलेशन अंग्रेजी में, तहत फिर वो अनुदित टेक्स्ट का मशीन में भाषा अंग्रेजी में. हम भाषा मैथिली में मैथिली के टाइप भाग है और अनुवाद भाग अंग्रेजी में, फिर अनुदित अंग्रेजी का मशीन फिर अंग्रेजी भाषा. एंड टू एंड टेक्नोलॉजी के व्यवस्था भाग है. मैं बहुत क्रिटिकल है कि हमारा स्पीच टेक्नोलॉजी बहुत है. Speech recognition and speech synthesis. And future major हम सब apply करने चाहिए. I'll talk about that later. IIT Madras or JNU. In a separate project proposal, we have applied for 23 language speech technology. This ASR apply करने चाहिए. Let's hope that we'll get something out of it. And then if it comes, we'll create 2,000 hours of recorded data for Maithili. Project invitation. That's the goal. I selected one recognition JIT Noida में है कि एक group चला गया है कि हम segmented speech हम रुक का बाजी तो मशीन को recognize करने के लिए. That's what they have done. Very basic research. Again, a baseline system. And the वाक्यांश group ये वाक्यांश group जे 12-13 भारतीय भाषा के very simple baseline ASR has been developed. You can go to the website and check for Maithili. यदि यहाँ मैथिली धीरे-धीरे भाषा तो एक आध सेंटेंस को रिकॉग्नाइज कर ले. That's a very beginning kind of word baseline system. Similarly, baseline TTS जो हो बना लिए हैं महात्मा गांधी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय यूनिवर्सिटी की टीम के द्वारा with CI data that Narayan generated was used to create this thing. Now language processing में जो major areas है part of speech diagram. I had a student from Madhubani University, and he was going to do a part of speech standard, a rule-based standard. Our website was separated. sanskrit.jdu.ac.in. Our website here. We have a 5-cluster server. Finally, Patanjali, Katan, Bhattacharya, Nagesh, or various. उस server पर सब resources available. जो statistical pure standard मैथिली के साथ पहले BIT में सर ग्रुप कराची में बहुत financial there's a project by Government of India led by Hyderabad University and JNU is a member between project for marginalizing of Maithili, and we're waiting for the last installment from the government, so we'll be finishing that very quickly. Then more favorites again by a PhD student from Wardha. We've done that. Our website में Maithili के section है, can see that. मैं सब चीज available है. Then Kalyani course is a lexicon of the energy. Online interface Kalyani course की हमारे site पर you can check that. फिर बाद predictive keyboard Swift key. Swift key हमारा Directorate consultancy 2015 में अभी created Maithili के predictive keyboard देवनागरी. And then there's a converter देवनागरी से iTrans में WH tradition में और 11 other scripts. There's a converter available. And I was looking at your presentation, middle Maithili and Nepali script. Very interesting observations you made about emergence of certain vowels, later modern Maithili should not get middle Maithili, and the disappearance of absence of number giving rise to ordericity. And then we have crawlers, dictionary, frequency builder tool also. You can all check that on our website. So you give a text, upload a text to Maithili, and very quickly a machine is going to give you a frequency analysis of the words, most written words, least written words, and all of this is that can be obtained from my website. Machine translation. A very important area, as I said, nothing is available as yet. Go next. Actually, English to Maithili paper के co-author ही है, Ritu. She's completed her PhD on English Maithili machine translation from MIT University of America. Just finished it, and with a blue score of 60. And it's a phrase-based, very baseline system. So if you give small phrases, machine is going to translate that into English. Very sentence there, the machine may pass it. And we have plans to actually improve on that. I think Microsoft Bing is a huge translator here, Google and Microsoft. I have been both of them consulted. Currently, I am consulting Google. So the Bing के वास्ते हम 2013 में कहना शुरू हुआ इंग्लिश टू उर्दू. बैक टर्च पे इंग्लिश मैथिली बाहर लेके हैं और हमारा तो हालांकि सबके बहुत जल्दी हमारा रिलीज कर इंग्लिश मैथिली के. Again, there will be very baseline system. Baseline system के बाद अपना फिर कम्युनिटी को ऑफर किया जाएगा. फिर कम्युनिटी को यूज कर रहे हैं. वैसे machine gets feedback and improves. That is the idea. And Hindi Maithili converter was created by Ritu for her PhD. Actually, English से Maithili parallel corpora करने वाला है. English से Maithili समानांतर corpora करने वाला है. English से Maithili बच्चे नहीं है. English हिंदी भरकर Google से हिंदी का Maithili में convert कर Java programs. The Java program which converts Hindi to Maithili, and that will create English to Maithili parallel corpora to boost that process. And Maithili English, there is one person who did Maithili English. I found his paper. It's not very clear what is the achievement in evaluation, etc. What was missing, so I can't really vouch for that. And the IT PhD group, they are also working on my machine translation for Maithili and Bhojpuri. Again, an old paper, so I don't know the current status of that. Now, progress made on big entry for Maithili. So there's a group in Microsoft Development Center in Redmond, and I was there briefly when I was a consultant and collaborating with them to creating more Indian languages. Can plan 100 Indian languages. Right now, they are only offering 12 Indian languages for machine translation. So Maithili might be the 13th language. The goal is that they had a platform, Microsoft Translator Hub, which I had access to when I was the consultant. And now it's moved to neural machine translation. So the training was done on SLT initially. Now we are training on neural machine translation. I am training in neural machine translation on my computer. They are training neural machine translation on their machine. And then we'll put things together and things will be like. That is what we are doing right now. I'm training a Python-based open NLP model on CPU-based system, which should be GPU certainly. But within 6 months, things will be released. And I have just sent an email to Vishal Chaudhary from Microsoft Redmond Group to update me what is the current progress. Now, resource solution is the most important aspect because without resource, no NLP, no AI happens. Now, we have done a lot of Maithili corpora, text corpora dictionary under SP2's project. Details can be obtained on our website. And Maithili text corpora, frequency dictionary, etc. is also done. Is also done under the Swift key considers project. And then LDCR corpora is available. I just checked, they have 3 lakh tokens. So about, I believe, would be about 5 lakh sentences, and roughly, and about 500 titles and 5 domains. Again, Maithili speech corpora is also there, about 78 plus hours. MIT University recently created about 45,000 sentences parallel corpora. The interesting thing is that they have also marked divergence. जो भाषा में अनुवाद हम करेंगे, हम इंग्लिश में मैथिली में करेंगे अनुवाद हम, तो भाषा के जो अंतर डिफरेंसेस में ऊपर मार्क करने का प्रॉब्लम. That's what they are claiming differences. And then they also have a monolingual corpora of 25,000 sentences. Now the two interesting proposals that we have made to LLTM, and currently they are going through the shortlisting process. I'm collaborating with IIT Patna for a baseline Hindi to Maithili NT. So we'll start, if this project is granted, we'll start the project very soon and try to complete it as soon as possible. And the goal is to create 200,000 parallel text corpora with approximately 20 words per sentence. तो बड़े-बड़े वाक्य होंगे, ये कई वाक्य हैं जिनकी हम न्यूरल मशीन लर्निंग सिस्टम में ट्रेन कर सकेंगे. So sir, I've also sent a proposal with MLF University, the guys who finished the PhD recently, and the idea is to create English to Maithili machine translation. So there's a CTAC group doing English to Indian languages, but I'm doing a separate proposal for English to Maithili with MLF University. Hope that gets it. If you don't get it, then it might be put together with the CTAC proposal. I'm not sure this one. Now, another proposal that I have floated is a VARC proposal with 23 languages, Indian languages, including English, Indian English, which has 2,000 hours of prosody level data. The goal is to create a baseline ASR system. So Maithili is one of them, so I'm sure I'll get it in some languages. अब जो इंडस्ट्री है उनकी काज कर रही है. इंडस्ट्री में जो मेजर प्लेयर्स हैं वो गूगल, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट. गूगल की बेसिकली सर्च इंजन के काज कर रही है. सर्च इंजन में गूगल असिस्टेंट, the very important speech assistant. Currently we are trying to make this speech assistant and translation more robust in capturing the varieties of Indian languages. They have done 13 languages. They have Maithili nahi ho gaye. They also do document recognition, and recently they came up with Moodle. Moodle is a multilingual representation in languages, the bird-based model. They have 17 Indian languages. They called me to tell me that they have included Sanskrit in it, but they did not include Maithili. Maithili is not there. Sanskrit bhi hai, Maithili nahi. But I'm currently consulting with them in trying to make sure their system recognizes Maithili variety, Bhojpuri variety, and Haryanvi variety. It's something that. So two consultancies, last year we had a consultancy on studying bilingual interactions, Maithili, Bhojpuri, Haryanvi speakers. This year I just got a consultancy to do speech variations. Microsoft Bing Search, they have 12 languages. Again, Maithili nahi ho gaye. English Maithili to be released soon. That's what I have from them. And then Microsoft Research, they do a lot of research which involves Indian language, including Maithili also. And there's AI agent open report on about famous agent here, and there'll be kind of scaling it up to include more Maithili languages. This is what I heard from them. ये एंटी प्लेटफॉर्म की जब वही भी है, देखो हाँ ये माइक्रोसॉफ्ट गूगल में Maithili दोनों में नहीं है. At this point Maithili दोनों में नहीं है जो मेजर प्लेटफॉर्म. But hopefully in 6 months time Maithili will be at least in play. तो तीसरा जो important Amazon Alexa और other platform translation किया है, but they are not really big into Indian languages except in Amazon Alexa which our विद्यार्थी क्लास में प्रकाश कर रही है. तो वो can Hindi Alexa just launch कर रहा है Hindi Alexa. Hopefully Maithili is not launched subsequently, but right now Hindi is their focus. मतलब यहाँ मशीन का किस कबू आप मशीन रिकॉग्नाइज करते हैं, हम बस में सर्च कर सकते हैं Alexa. Apple के Siri big platform here, they are not big into Indian languages right now. Okay, expensive platform here, expensive phone here, the India market was the busy I don't think it will be a very good thing for them. जब हम सब स्विफ्ट को काज करना चलो तो जब मैं स्विफ्ट had partnered with Carbon Mobile and they had done a release of all the 22 Indian languages mobile keyboards, proprietary keyboards. There was a panel discussion in Delhi. In that panel discussion, Chetan Bhagat was participating with me and we had a very interesting discussion there. Samsung also बहुत तेजी से उभर रही है. They have a very good center in Bangalore, AI center. I've been there. और उस सब की क्या है कि जितनी भारतीय भाषा है, उस सब भारतीय भाषा के enable करने का डिवाइस है. जैसे washing machine will be running on commands. Start bhajaओ, off bhajaओ, bar कपड़ा है, board कपड़ा है. All kinds of things are being done, by their systems. So the hardware that Samsung sells will be embedded within the language. Many startups and SMEs are actually in this field. मैं याद है एक बहुत young मैथिली लड़का हमारे ऑफिस में आया चला कि हम स्पीच पर काज कर रहे थे, and he had taken a lot of loans from the bank actually to do Maithili technology for speech, and got a lot of ideas actually, exchange a lot of ideas with them, and most of these guys are working in areas which are going to get a lot of money, legal domain generation, legal domain, बहुत पैसा है, ऊपर काज करेंगे, health पर काज करेंगे, education पर काज करेंगे. But for day-to-day communication, they need a लोग क्या है पर मैथिली में basically started conversation there. So where do we go from here, and what is the road ahead for us? हम सोच रहे थे कि जब baseline entry system का बढ़िया बन जाए English to Maithili, then that can be given to people. जब हम सब उर्दू लिखना है, उर्दू हम लिखना चलो निकाले उर्दू system baseline बने, लोग करते हैं डेली में क्या workshop के लोग, and let people use the system, and then machine gets feedback. मशीन का अनुवाद देना कर मशीन गलत अनुवाद करे हमरा करेक्ट कर दिया आज ये करेक्शन करबै ओइ से मशीन सीखे छै जखन उर्दू के रिलीज भेल छले कम्युनिटी के दैट बेनिफिटेड द सिस्टम 13 में उर्दू रिलीज भेल छले एखन बहुत इंप्रूव भ छै यदि बिंग में यदि मैथिली रिलीज भ जाए त 2-4 साल में बहुत बेसी इंप्रूव भ जाए मैथिली के दैट वुड बी नाउ सिमिलरली इंटरनेट The Bing translator here, it was released in 2013, and it has improved significantly from there. If you go there, you use English to go there. So this is a Bing translator on Microsoft. If you select English here and Urdu there, so select Urdu here, then you get the JNU was a partner for creating this system for them. So similarly, we can do Maithili. I'm very hopeful that in 6 months' time we do Maithili also a big platform. Can you go back to the slide again? Now there are other areas that we can obviously do literary festival here, and I'm sure as Mr. Yadav was talking about, we do Maithili and need to preserve and digitize this manuscript, valuable manuscript. I think digital manuscript is a big area. जिससे हमारे बहुत बड़े फायदा पा सके यही लाके पूरा मैनेजमेंट हमरा अपन परिवार में संस्कृत के बहुत मैनेजमेंट हुआ परिवार में हम सब के दिल्ली लागल छी वो मिथिलाक्षर में ये मिथिलाक्षर मिथिलाक्षर हम पढ़ने से देखी I had my student, Bengali student, who had a look at it. I was able to do 70% of it. और कहला कि जब धर्मशास्त्र के मैनुस्क्रिप्ट है हमारे परिवार के यानी कि उपनयन मतलब संस्कार की प्रोज में डिस्क्रिप्शन है प्रोज संस्कृत वेरी रेयर टू फाइंड बीच बीच में मैथिली सॉन्ग या बांग्ला सॉन्ग अभी बीच में हमारे ग्रैंडफादर के जमींदारी के बीच रिसीट्स हुए पता नहीं किसे कुछ इट्स अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग डॉक्यूमेंट someday I will be able to digitize it and translate it. I have taken it to my office in Delhi. I thought the बहुत काजी है कि जिससे ह्यूमैनिटी में भाषा की आसानी से. Now some ideas for entrepreneurship are kind of draw something. What can be done actually? Now, we did a white paper arranged by myself and with an Alice in we did a seminar in JNU, Soil Tech, Sanskrit and other Indian languages and technology, and idea was to create a white paper on the lines of European Commission. And we have the same format. We're going to release the white paper for all languages. My thing was to update economic currency, which will give you the latest findings, and then that will be published. This will be a good paper for anybody who wants to do language technology for Maithili. It's available here, kada available here, bhajpal hai, achi hua kiche. That will be the white paper. Now, very briefly, what we do in JNU, also with government projects on machine translation, Sanskrit to Hindi, and the parsing tools for Indian languages, including, of course, Maithili, and Indian language corpora, big consortium of 17 universities led by JNU. We built a parallel corpora of 100,000 sentences, tagged sentences. Then consultancies from government and from industry, actually, bilingual interactions, currently Google going on right now, and we just finished this one. Maithili Bhojpuri returning speakers, again Google consultancy. Google has pressed $10 billion investment in Indian languages. अब उनका कहाव चाहिए कि हम सब भारतीय भाषा के अंग्रेजी के बराबर हिंदी, which is a tall claim actually. But let us see. Then Kashmiri was the keyboard nuance technology के वास्ते. Then Maithili के keyboard Sanskrit Santali Manipuri Maithili Sindhi 2015 released with Carbon Mobile. Handwriting recognition funded by Microsoft 2006. I had that connection been to Redmond to study there. One time we said acquired connection Nokia. Nokia, where they wanted Devanagari recognition, automatic handwriting recognition. But a model later, I was consulting the University of Pennsylvania. That time I had met Cardona there, so I had lunch with Cardona. I had a talk over there. I knew she was attending the talk. So we did actually 8 sensitive languages. And Maithili रही है, ये सब भाषा sensitive है terrorist point of view से. US airport पर दोनों terrorist जा रहे हैं, और अपन भाषा में गप कर रहे हैं. The machine can flag him or her as belonging to some country. Face से अंदर में नहीं कर सकते, तो लोग बहुत mix भाग गए. लेकिन भाषा के accent से you can recognize someone with language, a language accent. And Microsoft Translator helps, so I already showed you that we did this English to Urdu. Now English Maithili is very possible, happening very soon, and also the other pairs. There's a monster tool that we use. You can download, you can use it from our website. We collect corpora very quickly. And it will take basically corpora, create the bar, frequency dictionary very quickly, automatically. In a matter of hours, you can create a big frequency dictionary of Maithili. So you crawl corpora from the internet resources and then run it, and it will create a frequency dictionary very quickly. And then research done by our students. So we do every 2 years European platform seminar. We present our things. We're doing the 6th one in France again next year. And so this is a resource website link here, our YouTube channel here, and this is what we do. So thank you so much. बहुत धन्यवाद. I'm so honored, so humbled to be here with all of you. खासकर अपन community बीच में वाला को भेजने समय आया हूँ, and happy visiting world. Thank you so much.
Again, also Professor Girish Naran Jha के सुनिए जे क्या आगू वाला समय में मैथिली के विकास करते और मैथिली के आधार पर गूगल और तमाम जे इलेक्ट्रिकल जे एखन डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म पर हम सब काज कर रहल छियै ओ केना आगू बढ़तै मैथिली। अब एकटा ऑनलाइन हमरा से जुड़ल छथि शिवांगी प्रिया जी। शिवांगी प्रिया बेसिकली समाज में भाषाई अध्ययन केने छथिन और बीआईटी पिलानी से विश्व पिलानी से पीएचडी छनि हुनकर और मणिपाल विश्वविद्यालय जयपुर में भाषा विभाग में कार्यरत छथि।
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Okay, am I audible?
Yes. Yes, please.
First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Narayan Chaudhary sir and Savita ma'am and organizers of the symposium for giving me this opportunity to present my work here. I'm here to present my talk on linguistic ideologies and attitude of speakers, a dialectic study of mapping speakers. So I'll start with the introduction, where I'll discuss the rationale of my study. Then I'll be discussing the major findings of my study, followed by the discussions of my ongoing work. The risk of language endangerment. So this is not always true, and the process of language shift is poorly understood. Most of the time, languages with large population size and official status are not language shift or endangerment. So these are some of the languages across the world which are undergoing shift and are on the verge of endangerment, despite their large size and official status in their respective nations. So the study of language shift and language maintenance finds its theoretical underpinning in the works of Fishman, who defines the study of language maintenance and language shift is concerned with the relationship between change or stability in habitat language use on the one hand, and ongoing psychological, social, or cultural processes on the other hand, when populations differing in language are in contact with each other. So the people directly affected are minorities almost by definition, but this is not the most of the time, languages with large population size and official status are not acknowledged to face language shift or endangerment. Now, moving on to the Indian scenario, there is an underlying assumption of existing language hierarchy. A substantial body of literature in social linguistic context of India focuses on the debates over unfair treatment of languages by the top position, followed by the 8 scheduled languages. and on the third position comes the non-8 schedule languages, and at the bottom comes undocumented languages. So for the safeguard and promotion of languages, the Constitution of India has made special provision in its 8th schedule, which provides formal and constitutional recognition to 22 dominant regional languages in various groupings. So initially there were 14 languages. Now there are languages as a result of various movements demands made by different language communities for the inclusion of their languages in the 8th schedule. Uh, Now, if we look at the literature, a substantial body of literature in social linguistic context of India has focused on debates over unfair treatment of unscheduled languages and the existing language hierarchy. A large body of literature suggests the shift of minority languages to dominant regional languages at the state level, the shift of minority languages to Hindi, particularly in North India, and shift of regional languages to English at the national level. However, there are very few studies which observe the shift of executive languages, especially non-territorial languages such as Sindhi, Kashmiri, Santhali, that are shifting to the dominant regional languages of their state. So thus it becomes crucial to assess the effectiveness of inclusion of languages in the eighth schedule, since in India there are already 38 languages in the group. As the shift of non-territorial eighth schedule languages is under study, Mathli is one of the examples. So now, moving on to the Bihar's linguistic scenario, there are three major languages: Bhojpuri, Hindi, and Maithili. Hindi and Urdu are the official and the second official languages of the state, respectively. Maithili is spoken in Nepal and Bihar. According to 2011 census, more than 30 million people speak this language. Also, throughout the work of Grierson, who conducted the first linguistic survey, a contradiction regarding the status of Mathli is prevalent regarding the position of Mathli. Before I continue, I would like to share an anecdote that when I moved out to Bihar, often people would associate Bhojpuri with Bihar. And it was very surprising for me that very few people knew about Maithili because for them, Bihar means Bhojpuri. So that intrigued and that provided motivation to study the impact of the inclusion of languages in the eighth schedule, because Maithili was included in the eighth schedule in 2003. As most of the language politics in North India is overshadowed by the populace of Hindi and Urdu. So, if we look at the case of Mathili, the shift of the Mathili has been acknowledged by many linguistically institutions, and which also insinuates the negative attitude of the speakers towards Mathili, as they try to associate with Hindi because of its accompanied prestige and status. Also, the identity-based politics and marginalization of the Mathili has been explored from anthropological and political perspective. So there was the need to explore the effects of various socio-cultural factors such as caste and religion on the attitude of the speakers towards the Mathili and its usage. So, and also the case of Mathili in the Indian context is scarcely mentioned. I took three parameters, which was intergenerational transmission, usage and patterns of the language, and attitude of the speakers. For the field study, I chose Madhubani and Darbhanga, the two districts which records the highest number of Maithili speakers. For the first parameter, which the average of all the four skills for both the languages were taken based on the self-rated proficiency of the speakers. As we can see that there is a spread in the skills across age cohort for Mathili. The language skills rating for Mathili in age cohort 1 is the lowest, whereas it is the highest for the Hindi language. This suggests the passive bilingualism in younger generation. Furthermore, speakers belonging to age cohort 1 are more likely to experience the impact of Mathili's inclusion in the 8th schedule. In this table, the decadal change percentage from 1971 to 2011 has been given. So there is a fall of 19.51% of the total Mathili speakers from 1981 to 1991. On the contrary, there is a rise of 53.61% from 1991 to 2001 census. From 2001 to 2011, a downfall of 45.28% in the proportion of Maithili speakers within the total population can be observed. The fall in the proportion of Maithili speakers is also evident from 2001 to 2011. The reporting of an actual number of Maithili speakers in the census has been a matter of conflict between scholars and the census agency. The scholars such as Grierson, Lukas and others claim that the number of total Maithili speakers in Bihar is far more than is reported widely that. During Field's visit, it was observed that many respondents, especially from rural areas, reported Hindi as their mother tongue, although they used Maithili as a language. The speakers have this implicit notion of Kheti and pure Mathli. Many speakers do not acknowledge Mathli as their mother tongue and Hindi to be their language, since it is their variety of Mathli dialects. They do not qualify as pure Mathli or the standard variety. So this observation shows how internal language variation can affect the demographic preferences in census activity. Internal language variation is also going on between Angika and Batika speakers, and they do not report themselves as nationals. So, in summary, despite numerical strength, there is a lack of awareness among speakers about their mother tongue and language variation. Apart from the inconsistent approach to the census, leading to discrepancy in the census report, the above factors to affect the recorded absolute number of Mathili speakers. So, in order to understand the impact of inclusion, that how inclusion has impacted the attitude of the speakers, its usage in various domains, Mathili was analyzed. The usage of Mathili was analyzed on three parameters: language, its use in home domain, language use in different settings, and language use in different media and web platforms. So, as illustrated in this figure, the use of Mathli with grandparents and parents is high, whereas a downward trend can be seen in the language used with siblings, children, and friends. Also, the number of respondents using only Hindi is high, which suggests that Hindi has completely replaced Mathli in these contexts. This shows the changing language pattern in successive generations. The function of Mathli is not only to transmit Hindi, Richmond considered family domain as a strong host of use in minority-oriented languages. So, language preference of Mathli speakers in different settings, which is an essential indicator of the robustness of the language and speakers' drawing towards their mother tongue. Though the two districts covered in the present study have the majority of Mathli speakers, Hindi and English are used at the school and university education system. In such a scenario, it is interesting to see how the native speakers behave in terms of language preference at different places of education, including workplace, social media, and community gathering. So, as illustrated in this figure, the language usage of respondents in traditional narrative and on social media is dominated by Hindi. Additionally, a majority of respondents use Hindi in informal settings. Furthermore, while Mathli's usage is high in a community gathering, Hindi is also used by many respondents. It was observed that participants think of Mathli as inferior to Hindi and they avoided the usage of Mathli in public or formal domains. A self-segregation in the choice of languages to be used in different domains was observed amongst the speakers. Um, in this, the Mathli usage in print media was analyzed. So the data was collected by asking the respondents to input what they read in print media and think all the languages that they use, such for the newspaper, magazines, and books. Uh, 342 respondents in Hindi newspaper, and it turned out that currently no newspapers are being published in Mathli. A few Mathli leaders tried to publish newspapers but failed and discontinued eventually due to a shortage of leadership and lack of financial support. So there are literary magazines in Mathli, but these also lack readership as very few respondents read Mathli magazines and books. Interestingly, in Bihar, not even English has that position which Hindi occupies here. Hindi newspapers are too high in demand amongst the readers. Now, every district in Bihar has its own Hindi newspaper edition. In this figure, uh, usage of Mathli in electronic media was analyzed. So, out of 380 respondents, 83% respondents reported that they watch Hindi news, TV serials, and films. But only 6% of respondents watch Mathli content on electronic media. This shows the negligible presence of Mathli in electronic media. Currently, there are no TV channels in Mathli. Some serials are broadcast on local channels. Um, the domain of use for Mathli differs in each local speech community. Factors like age, caste, and religion of speakers determine the variation in the use of Mathli in different domains. So, based on qualitative data, it was observed that older Mathli speakers always speak Mathli among themselves, apart from loan words. Younger people code switch with Hindi. There are communities, people belonging to different castes, where everyone code switches, and in communities, mostly Muslim, some members could speak Mathli and others could not. So, the attitude of the speakers has been analyzed with respect to different demographic factors such as age, gender, and socio-cultural factors such as caste and religion. In qualitative data, the older generation retreated their angst towards the young Mathli speakers' lack of loyalty and pride towards their language. Often it recurred in the interview that the young speakers do not want to use Mathli in public as they fear of being judged and therefore refrain from using Mathli. The theme of Mathli speakers' lack of language loyalty and pride is often repeated in the interview. Additionally, the qualitative data revealed an underlying notion that Mathli spoken by Brahmins is of purest form. This is encapsulated in the following excerpt where participant 2 says, any village which is Brahmin dominated, there this language is spoken most, and those villages where Brahmins are not there, they have to learn this language. They have to make conscious effort to learn Mathli. Participant 3 says, suppose if I say, sir, emhar aao, apne emhar aao, that is not Mathli language. This is more colloquial language. If I will also stay with Brahmins, I can also speak like them. Participant 4 says, as I said, ours is more colloquial form of tutti frutti Mathli. Uh, so this presents a case of social elite, where Brahmins Mathli is considered to be the standard variety. This attitude reflects how speakers have made a self-internalized distinction between right and wrong, and thus rejecting dialectical variation of Mathli. Further, in the qualitative data, a self-internalized notion of pure Mathli was evident. It was observed that the Muslim speakers had a notion that their mother tongue is Urdu and not Mathli. It was observed that to some extent, religious ideology influenced linguistic identity of the speakers. In addition to this, it was found in the qualitative data that the degree of monolingualism is higher among women, especially in the older generation. Some mixing of Hindi, and it was observed during the focus group discussions that the female participants, who were mainly housewives and had a lower level of education, primarily conversed in Mathli. So one of the patterns that emerged during these discussions is that women associate themselves with Mathli more, as their domain is mainly related to home. In most cases, Mathli is often treated as the home language, and they term it as Gharelu Bhasha, which can be seen in the following excerpts, where P29 says, at home I make my folks speak my language. I will not lie that I speak in their language. My folks use their language outside. So she was referring to Hindi. These kids go to work where they speak in their language, but I use my language with them at home. So for her, Maithili was the Gharelu Bhasha, and Hindi was their language, which is mostly spoken by the literate people. Um Many participants share this common notion that Maithili is the language of illiterate people and educated people use Hindi. Often in the interview, older generation people, mostly monolingual in Maithili, would refer to their language, Maithili, as the language of illiterate, and would point out at their children or young generation speakers who know Hindi as the language of educated people. So this notion is also exemplified in this excerpt, where participant 30 says, I used to mix up language most of the time Hindi. Uh, I myself cannot speak good Mathi, then how will I teach my kids? So here, this lady, she had developed this. She thought that her variety of Mathli was not correct, and so she didn't want her children to learn wrong Mathli. I mean, the Thethi Mathli. So she used Hindi with them. A language with when we talk of linguistic ideologies and language attitudes, a language with status is perceived to be interlinked with upward social mobility, economic advancement, and power. Since the independence of India, Hindi has reigned as the official language of the Union, the dominant language, especially in the North India belt. In contrast, other regional languages have been marginalized and stigmatized. Often, indigenous language speakers of minority languages opt not to use their language in public settings. Hornberg has termed this tendency as linguistic shift. Also, the attitude of the Mathi speakers reflects this hierarchical relationship where Mathi speakers choose not to use their language in many situations to avoid the stigma attached to speaking it. The attitude of Mathi speakers reflects and reinforces the ideology of Hindi as a superior language. For instance, in the interviews, the parents suppose the use of Mathli in the public domain, reasoning Mathli as a Gharelu Bhasha. So this is indicative of overt prestige factor, which emphasizes the positive view for the dominant language for the socio-economic reasons. So this was resonated repeatedly in the interviews by the respondents, where participant 11 says, we want our children to learn Hindi. It's better for their growth. Suppose if they go out of Bihar and know only their home language, then they will not understand the language of the other city. People will not consider it good, and they will frown upon our kids. Uh, in the qualitative data, it was observed that many speakers value Mathili as part of their culture and identity and use it to communicate among themselves. The awareness of Mathili status and attitude towards Mathili potentially vary from one community to another based on various factors and dynamics of the caste, age, religion, and gender. The respondents belonging to the Brahmin caste overtly value Mathili as an identity marker of their culture and support the use and preservation of the language. In contrast, young respondents pay more attention to acquiring Hindi and English than maintaining their own language. And it is not that they do not value Mathili. However, social consciousness is absent among the young speakers. So there is evidence of linguistic ideologies that value a particular variety of Mathili and perceive it to be more prestigious than other varieties. There is a tendency among speakers to perceive other varieties of Mathili that are even linguistically similar as low varieties. In the case of Mathili, the variety spoken by the Brahmin caste is considered to be the pure Mathili, and often the variety of Mathili spoken by speakers belonging to the non-Brahmin caste is considered as Thethi. For instance, one of the respondents said that she teaches her children, which I have already mentioned, to use Hindi at home, as she herself was not proficient in the variety of Mathili, pure Mathili, which they termed it, spoken by Brahmins in her in-laws' village. So she didn't want her kids to use Thethi Mathili with their grandparents, as they didn't consider it civilized. So to conclude, a broken intergenerational transmission was observed. Also, the usage of Maithili is limited to home language. There is a generational shift in the attitude of the respondents. Maintenance of Maithili in the future is not possible without an active effort and the proper implementation of language policy and educational policy. The status planning in the form of inclusion is not effective until acquisition planning is not taken into consideration. Literary transmission is declining at an alarming rate, as that we have already seen in the graph that was mentioned earlier. So, in order to understand the effectiveness of the 8 scheduled languages, I have undertaken a comparative study between the non-territorial 8 scheduled languages and unscheduled languages. Also, how the people's perception of Boli and Bhasha differs. So, for that, I have taken a dialectical, I'm working on the dialectical study. These are some of the references that I have used in my presentation. Thank you.
एखन हमसब शिवांगी प्रिया के सुनै छलियनि हँ भाषा विचारधारा के बीच में वक्ता के की दृष्टिकोण होइ छै तै पर वो अपन व्याख्यान दै छथिन हँ। अब हम अध्यक्ष महोदय से अनुरोध करबै जे अध्यक्षीय उद्बोधन के लिए मंच पर परमात्मा
पीछे आवाज हो जाता है वॉल्यूम बहुत तेज बोलिए यहाँ से वहाँ अंदर से हाँ अंदर से विवेक को फोन करिए बोलिए।
हेलो परमादरणीय डॉक्टर नाम का परमादरणीय डॉक्टर गीष्मान हाजी, आदरणीय डॉक्टर नारायण चौधरी जी, उपस्थित विद्वान लोग जखन हमरा आजुक कार्यक्रम अध्यक्षता कहल गेल शौक एक बेर और हमरा अवग्रह पड़ गेल आज बिहार में कोयला फाउंडेशन के एक सम्मेलन में डॉक्टर यादव जी छला है, डॉक्टर योगेंद्र प्रसाद यादव जी छला, दोनों अपना अपना हमरा सबके ओहि हमरा कहल गेल कि ई सब जे बजलखिन तै पर अहाँ रिपोर्ट दियौ।
ई हमरा सन लोग के जकरा भाषा शास्त्र से कोनो संबंध नहीं छै, तकरा कहते जे भाषा वैज्ञानिक सबके वक्तव्य पर से अपन टिप्पणी दियो तो केहन अवग्रह हेतै जान में से हमरा डॉक्टर यादव जी जे विषय कहलनि इतिहास जे छै मैथिली व्यापक क्षेत्र छलै तकर बहुत सुंदर व्याख्या कयलनि आ की एखन ओ से मरावतन के कष्ट भऽ रहल अछि आधुनिक लोकके तेकरो रोक देलनि। काल्हि की हेतै हमरा सब की करैके चाही? 90 ईस्वी के गप छियै, हम पीएचडी भक्त के लिए ज्ञात हुनका हम रिजर्वमेंट में काज करी ओहिठाम ले जे क्लियरिंग हाउस के कंप्यूटराइज करो और हमारा आंदोलन के लिए जे नहीं से नहीं हुआ दे हम हमारे जे हैंड दे से समाप्त कर, लेकिन सरकार ने मानल के लेकिन कोई चीज के आई अनुभव करे छिए हमर चेक दै छै हमर पाई भेट जाइए से अनुभव आई करे छिए 30 वर्ष 25 वर्ष बाद आई जे गिरीश जी कहले ने हमरा लोग के अनुभव करे थोड़ा दिन बाद करीब 2-3 वर्ष होइ छै एकटा दिल्ली से हमरा महिला फोन केलक जे हमरा करीब 5-10 हजार से हिंदी के वाक्य छोट वाक्यांश के मैथिली चाहिए हमरा अपन से अहाँ बैंक अकाउंट से हो दिए इसलिए हम नहीं पठौली वो हमरा से हिस्ट्री से पॉलिटिकल साइंस से सिनेमा से विज्ञान से करीब 10,000 वाक्यांश पठौले उनका मैथिली अनुवाद हम दऽ देलियै ओकर बाद की भेलै ओ केओ खोज केलनि हुनकर छलनि कि जे ई जखन अनुवाद भऽ जेतै मैथिली में तऽ न्यूज पढ़ै छै देखै छियै जे केना कैप्शन आबि जाइ छै तऽ तेना कैप्शन मैथिली में आबि जेतै ई एहिमे की छलै से तऽ बीएससी सब कहता लेकिन हमरा सब केलिए शिवांगी जे बजै छलिए ओ तऽ अद्भुत हमरा आँखि खोलि देलनि एकटा करीब 30 वर्ष 40 वर्ष पहिने एकटा गोबर अंग्रेजी केने छलाह मैथिली पर स्ट्रगल केने छलै पोथी तहिना ओ आँखि खोलि देलनि जे मैथिली के स्थिति की अछि अहाँके कते ओकर डिक्रीज कऽ रहल अछि ओकर जे फंक्शनल लोड छै जे बढ़ै छै कि घटै छै ओकर ट्रांसपेरेंसी बढ़ै छै कि घटै छै से बहुत विलक्षण ढंग से ओ शिवांगी जी कनी विश्लेषण केलनि हमरा सबके आँखि खोलि देलनि जे देखियौ अहाँ सब खाली हंगामा खाली कविते पढ़बैत रहबै लोकके ओकर जे डोमेन से तकरा विस्तार करियौ यदि डोमेन से विस्तार नहीं करै छियै अहाँके खाली कविता कथा उपन्यास लिखला से काज नहीं चलत मैथिली के संरक्षण से नहीं है उसका जे विषय छल से तो आँखि खोलेला विषय छलै कि दोसर बात छै जे कतहु अलग एडी अलग बोलिए तो बात चलै छल तेहन विषय छलैए एडी तो लगबै छलिए कनि बुझिए लेकिन माथ ऊपर बात वो चल जाइ छलै तथा जे किछु मिललिए से बहुत विद्वतापूर्ण मतलब जे एहि तरहक जे आयोजन हेतै तऽ 10-5 गोटा हेतै 10,000 हाथी के बल पर से हमरा सबके ई अवसर भेटल है हम से सीआईएल के और संस्था के बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद दै छियै जे हमरा अनायास अनुभव अवसर भेट गेल आ दुनू तीनू विद्वान के हम बहुत से साधुवाद दै छियै गिरीशनाथ जी के लक्षण लगे हमरा भेट अछि मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ टेलीकम्युनिकेशन 6 ईस्वी में कार्यक्रम केने छलै प्राय कोई महार दही चाहे पेपर पढ़ने
ट्राई वाला लेक्चर
हां वो 3-4 लैंग्वेज छलै मैथिली बोडो और कोई प्राय हाँ रही से हमरा मोन पड़ैया करीब 5 ईस्वी में छी तऽ ओकर बाद हमरा पहिल भेट भेल आ भेट भेल तऽ क्षेत्र पढ़ाओ पर क्षेत्र में काज कर रहा है निश्चित रूप से मैथिली के भाषा के एक बहुत पैघ उत्कर्ष भेटते विकास भेटते ये सब संग अपने सबके हम आभार व्यक्त करै छी।
क्वेश्चन आंसर तो नहीं आते हो
क्वेश्चन आंसर
अरे क्या सर आज से क्या कुछ हाँ आज से किसी I'm not sure whether I understood you properly or not, but I was given to believe that Newari, मतलब which is Newari and Maithili बहुत similarity यहाँ का food script
Not the language.
language is
No. Tibetan word.
दोनों हिसाब से नेपाल में हाँ मुझे तो वही 4th century 6th century या oldest scripts that we can say that okay this belongs to Maithili
4th century.
going to be oldest going to be text पे जो दिनेश ठाकुर के अलावा दिनेश ठाकुर का के बार बढ़िया नेपाल का हम आज सवाल के क्या पूछ रहल छी एकर कारण ई छै जे भारत में एकटा अलग से लैंग्वेज स्टेटस दे जा रहल छै एखन जेकरा कहै छै क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज अब जेना कि तमिल के देल छै संस्कृत के देल छै किछु और भाषा के देल छै ओडिया के देल छै अब ओडिया का अहाँ क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज के टैग दऽ देलियै तो हम मैथिली के हम बताऊं तो उसके लिए मैथिली दियो तो वही बात पर बात चले छै तो मैं अब कमिटी लेवल जेते इशू अब कमिटी लेवल जेते तो हम अपन एंटिटी देखेबै जो मैथिली के एंटिटी की छै अब हम आ देखेबै शुरुआत में बस के जे दिनेश ठाकुर से शुरू किया वही से पहले भी शुरू कर सकै छियै आ जरूरी नहीं छै कि हम मैथिली के दिखाबी वो बात से छै जो ओइ टाइम के जे प्रोटो लैंग्वेज छै ए एक रीजन ओइ प्रोटो लैंग्वेज के देखा के क्लेम कर सकै छियै अहाँ सीता से जुड़ल कोनो चीज देखा के ओडिया वाला केना अशोका के कलिंगा के पीरियड के जे छै किछ इंस्क्रिप्शन देखा के ये क्लासिकल ओडिया है अरे भैया ये क्लासिकल ओडिया हाउ कैन यू से दैट दिस इज क्लासिकल ओडिया this is simply an old script that was that time so whatever we have if we have anything distinct that we can claim that okay this belongs to the proto Maithili region please get it from there or those are the criteria to classical status के कारण occur each you should have a continuum of literary bodies which we have no one else has Hindus in the classification Maithili आपको continuum आपका proof कर तो ऐ सवाल पर हमारे सवाल जब हाँ नेपाल के तरफ से आगे पीछे है I think same perspective that would be great. First सवाल, दूसरा सवाल था modern Maithili में जो verbal conjugation है, और different paradigms है. आगे जब हम reference grammar पढ़े चला तो हम ML करे इसलिए, कोई time हाँ character जब पढ़ना पर हम लोग लागल जाते भाई हमारे जो भाषा है से नहीं है भाई हम अपना गांव में मान लीजिए समस्तीपुर दिशा या बिरोल दरभंगा दिशा में उनमें किस वर्बल कंजुगेशन से which we could not find तब हमें इको बस के जना इको करते जब एल्किन बेल्किन दूसरा और कौन बड़ा है जो ऐप जैप टाइप तब ये वर्बल कंजुगेशन से कौन कहते स्टडी पहले है कि बाकी है हो गया है आगे
बड़ा आसान से कह दिया नहीं काज काम काज जे भेलैया और एक इसको मार्जिन कर कोशिश नहीं ना अखन हमरा सब जे कहलहुँ हम एखन हमरा जिंदगी है मूलभूत सिद्धांत बात लग रहते जे एकर जेनेसिस विद्यापति धैर्य अहाँके कोनो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी नहीं है language very simple मूल के लोक ध्यान जाए गेल स्कॉलर्स के और आपके से पहले कह दी after my work after the jail से that was long ago I wrote that book in 1989 it was published in 1996 by Mohammed was about लगते से किताब था and I was trained basically as a phonetician believe it or not. त्यहाँ हाम्रा लेखहरू लेख्न आसान नै छ तर हाम्रा सामर्थ्यले जता भएन now you can add it to it, you can write another reference down नहीं बुझ्नु बाबु जने से बात बना देखने भाई you can always add to it आगे से लेकिन बीच में एक आध पेपर सब मिले but it is very hard problem की है जो उतना synthetic form है ना ये ओकरा bifurcate करना नहीं है आसान बहुत कठिन आगे त्या चंक में कहा गया है ना जे पुरुष आत्मा सब वह कर now you know the Turkish जगह नहीं थी जहाँ के एक बात क्या कर एक Sanskritic language है synthetic है तो ये problem था कैसे नहीं there was a paper written few years ago by a European scholar called Balthazar नाम सुनने पे यहाँ Balthazar famous in the audience वो मैथिली गायक के नाम आधार पर वही में एक तरह से जे लेविंसन के जे किताब है कर्टसी एटिकेट इस सब के बारे में on electricity के बारे में ते आधार पर एक्सटेंड कर कुछ एजेंट कैचो जो ग्राफ नहीं होती लेकिन वो प्रयत्न करते हैं कई बार उन्होंने नहीं किया हम तो आप दूसरों चीज में लाइक एखन हमार मेन उद्देश्य ये है जे क्यों हमरा करते नहीं है लेकिन क्यों ई पीड़ा उठावे जे जेनेसिस की जो ये एलए के वास्तव में मुंडा फैमिली से है से जना पहले तन्मय भट्टाचार्य की बैठक आप वो उनका हम पॉइंट आउट के लिए लेकिन आप वो टिबेटन वर्णन मुंडा दोनों के देखते तभी the language contact के स्टडी कर वाला I write that फिर जो कि पढ़ the language is in contact ठीक से पढ़ नहीं बोलो तो I'm not aware of any work कहाँ से को आप मेरी आजकल कहाँ से उस समय CIIS is the right place नहीं जब कोनो young scholarly बात करता
सीएल में क्या होता है तो हम तो अपने मैथिली में एको टका आज नहीं हो सही सर
हाँ तो अभी तो
एक्सेप्ट फॉर एक
जी डिजिटल वैसे हम पढ़ लो कौन ना आगे कलर जो लिंक्स है वो ग्राफ सब कलर कलर दिखा कर एक दिन में से वो प्रेस के सुविधा चले नहीं but it's a good work I want what the I feel that this is happening cover down nature language is a reality language loyalty is diminishing language maintenance is poor
Right why we focus and change with government of India जागे language policy पर ध्यान दे NEP 2020 लेने में मदद तक पर focus है right why focus
ये आहाँ के देश खाली भारत से नहीं नेपाल में भारत है हाँ नेपाल में भारत है and for justified reasons नहीं कई बार ऐसा पर research have जरूरी है no I don't think हमरा नजर में देखो I don't want to be very personal लेकिन देखिए हम grammar request submit करे चलिए for publication ओकर तो बहुत editor सब है ना मुझे तो आगे तो 50 का editorial विषय में किताब है तो एक का जे पहले इंटरेस्ट देखो ना से हमरा दूसरा एक बात तो हमें लाज हुई है दूसरा कहीं आगे को हम तो भूल गए वो हमरा कहाँ है साफ करो I don't foresee 50 years hence anybody writing a grammar like this in India Nepal I make vocabulary and show Kodio 50 वर्ष रेस्क्यू एंड ग्रामर नहीं दिखता वो कहाँ आगे की भी है जैसे से कोनो गुरुंग भाषा से आइए ग्रामर लिखले है established language एक व्याकरण पद्धति से बात है हम नहीं vocabulary ऐड कर besides I'm exhausted लिखे जर्मन में साल लगा हम खाई गए थी हम नहीं आगे एडिटोरियल में कामा फुल स्टॉप पर पोजीशन चेंज करना हुआ था करूँ वही के अलावा हम आगे कोनो चीज बदलने की अनुमति नहीं दी नहीं छापू नहीं करो तो क्या आप हम तो ऐसे उनका रॉन्ग सी दिखती है आराम से क्यों कंट्रीब्यूट करती
एक का प्रोजेक्ट हम सब प्लान कर रहे हैं सर मैथिली के जो वैरायटी है खास करके ये सर ये सर जब आप कुछ बाजी छिया मैथिली सीखे छे कोई जाए छे हां वो तबे तक नहीं तो जावे तो हम पूरा वैरायटी कैप्चर कर ले अदरवाइज जाने स्टैंडर्ड के पेन मेरा
नहीं नहीं हमने बात कर लो हम नहीं पढ़ी ऐसे वैरायटी की बात है हां
वैरायटी से पकड़ा गया है के प्रोजेक्ट हम प्लान कर रहे छी तीन का हमरा बुझल है जी अंगिका
बच्चिका
फल ले
आवेदन मगही सब नेपाल में आक्रमण हुआ
एगो हमर हाथ भगले सूर्यापुरी भगले नेपाल में किसान छे
नेपाल में ना थे नेपाल में एखन सेंसस लेगा एमे बहुत आगे सीरियस कंसर्न देखने चाहिए इंडिया में
नेपाल में वैरायटी के हिसाब से कुछ कोनो वैरायटी अलग से कैप्चर करिए हम सब
अध्ययन कुछ विद्यार्थी पर वेरिएशन पर एक PhD challenge है I never taught him and I was not the examiner वो promise कर से दूसरा thesis टाइम देव ने challenge है तो सर क्यों से वही आस्पेक्ट प्रोग्राम में व्याकरण वर्ग से खालिया है वो सब के यहाँ के जोड़ के वो सब जगह हमारा कंपाउंड वर्ग कैसे होगा एनएसमा बगले आप तो वो सब कैसे complex verbal predicate सब लैंग्वेज हम making fun of that तो complex verbal predicate पर वो लगा आप यहाँ thesis I was the examiner इसलिए हम दिल्ली में 11 पृष्ठ कमेंट्स यहाँ का सुधार को एक और अवसर आप देते हैं फाइनल इंटरव्यू होगा और he will get the degree he's improved क्या वो हम वेरिएशन वाला निकालना चाहिए आप देख लीजिए but I expect the assisting will finish her work on the cast एक स्टोरी बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरी है पेपर में जैसे अपना वो सब पूरा है अपना कार्य it all started with going down jobs of the crime और बात है उनका हम पहले हमारी ने क्या निकलो आगे तो वो कारण So now she's taking up the crystal values. हमरा नहीं दिखता यहाँ से कहूँ देखिए ठीक है I see a lot of promise in झाजी से अंदर सोने पास में trends नहीं दिखाई थी ये सब काय करते हैं इस खेल में से and I drew his attention to one very specific point that I mentioned that in a frequency that I think देखो Maithili teaching analysis description and teaching suffers because we don't have a list of most frequently used words in slang. How can you base your primary text if you don't have?
Of course,
I mean, I base the 3,000 most frequently used Maithili words there. Upon our corpus could be intercaled. Apakhan which revolutionized the Maithili teaching के realm में primary schools में high schools में textbook लिखा है सिर्फ वैज्ञानिक NCERT के नजर जाकर इनका वर्क पर कोई हम ये जो बात कर रहे हैं मैथिली भाषा शिक्षण पर तो वो एक पर कोई लाभ हम तो करें एजुकेशन में बहुत रहल सीता हमारा ध्यान में गेल है so I'm looking forward to the younger scholars
most frequent word is sir हम एकदम करी छी हम पूरा 22 बार के भाषा में बोर्डली सब में एग्जाम में निकल दी पब्लिश कर दी एलसीएम पर्पस
निकला है
निकालने में कोनो इशू नहीं सर 2 मिनट तक का है
पब्लिश करें कल
पब्लिश कर दी हमारे शेयर
प्लीज डू पक्का उपकार है
अगला महीना शेयर वेबसाइट पर बैठ जाता
है धराशायी भरले because of bad teaching at the primary and secondary तो एग्जाम में पास it's wrong teaching. They're teaching wrong books. पढ़ेवा जो किताबें कई बार है आगे ये सब बेसिक इशू है मैथिली के आगे जे सबल नहीं बात कार में जैसे ये pedagogical aspect पर से कनेक्ट ध्यान दे होगा grammatical linguistic जैसे फिडेस अपने सवाई सकी and another is socio linguistic बात या पेरेंट्स राइटिंग के बारे में पेपर जैसे मैथिली के माध्यम से एक वैदिक दृष्टिकोण हमें क्या आ गया
शांतनु ये बात को नोट कर लिया
मतलब I was hoping that you will tell me जे तकर बाद हम सब ये चलो
नहीं वो तो करते थे आपने वो लोग कदम उठाने से पहले एक लिस्ट देख लेते हैं ना जब वो कदम हम डुप्लीकेट नहीं उठा रहे थे यार कुछ हां
वेरी ट्रू नहीं
हां एकनो हमरा से बेसिक पढ़े छी
लागल छी आई एम नॉट अवेयर एक आदमी जो इटली के यंग स्कॉलर एकेडमिया एज ऊपर वो छप्पन हाई स्कूल बीच मैथिली का दुर्भाग्यवश उन्होंने कहा वो एकेडमिया एज हमरा ने हम कह दी वो हमरा कर जैसे इवैल्यूएटर बना हम कहले नहीं के हम अनुमति नहीं या वो नहीं था वो कहले जा आउटपुट यानी संकेत कर जाना हमरा नारायण जी से होई हम ड्रामा उतारे नाम में कभी नहीं थे का
सवाल का हम करी पूछ लीजो
बायोल मीन्स
जना एक्समन एकटा जगह छे पोर्थू में अभिलेख छे 11वीं शताब्दी और वो उम्मीद है कि तिरहुता के प्रारंभिक अभिलेख क्योंकि अपने चर्चा के लिए मिश्र जी के चर्चा के लिए अपने चर्चा के लिए अभिलेखागार के तो नेपाल में की मिथिलाक्षर या मिथिलाक्षर से संबंधित कोनो अभिलेख सब के होबाक जानकारी छै नहीं वो पांडुलिपि के संदर्भ हम अभिलेख हाँ हम इंस्क्रिप्शंस यस
आई
थैंक यू अपने इतिहास की चर्चा से हो के लिए पुरातत्व की चर्चा से हो के लिए
इंस्क्रिप्शन में आई थे ऐसे जी सब हम इंस्क्रिप्शन से ले लेना है वो नेवारी वो शिलालेख पर से कहानी पर से अब ओकरा वो सब कते नीक से का पढ़ले से देखी छु कहता वो तो भूकंप में आप बहुत नाश हो गए हैं लेकिन तथापि एक प्रफुल्ल कुमार या रामदेव या मिस्टर कॉलेज से रहते हैं वो सब सीरियस स्कॉलर्स रहते हैं मैं ये सही पढ़ लें although I always track लेकिन इंस्क्रिप्शन पुराण हमरा
ताता जा सकते हैं
आजा नहीं है तारो तो इंस्क्रिप्शन जल्दी
नहीं जरा 1097 में तो सिंगराम कर में नानदेव चाहिए लिखे
आई गाँव के
अभिलेख छे काठमांडू में अभिलेख छे प्रफुल्ल कुमार से मोनो पर चर्चा की है फिर एंशिएंट नेपाल की चर्चा जर्नल छे इटली के किस विद्वान से सब ओकरा देने छथिन तो ओइ में से हम ताकत के चाहिए कि कोन मिथिलाक्षर एंशिएंट नेपाल हां जो जर्नल छे गवर्नमेंट ऑफ नेपाल को पूरा
पूर्णिमा नाम के
पूरा डिटेल लिखी छे
I'm not a historian, but I need historical evidence from people like you to corroborate what I'm trying to say.
So just I'm asking you.
And हम पूछे सके उनका एक तो छठ पटना के म्यूजियम में शिव कुमार जी वो हमरा बहुत पूछे छला जे क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज का के सर नेपाल में हेते या हम कहलियो वो 13 से 24 no one knows exactly what not the situation होती है भूत समागम के 13 से 20 के तो we can't go further than that नहीं क्यों दिल्ली रमन देवी कहे थे नहीं क्यों कहे थे निजाम पास है तो तखन तो अपने सब उत्खनन का पूरा हुए या कहो इसी नॉर्मल वाला की कहिया से वो इंस्क्रिप्शन सबके ठीक सब प्रकाशन भेल छै ने छिटपुट जितने हाँ हमरा जे भेटल से ओते I never went into the original text of the book. Come on. Account Mishra Kotasa online, a co-pana the manuscript Pratithaya, you may like this thing like that. This is a difficult, it's a very damaging kind of work these scholars have done. And you know, it Pratibharsa Swarup, a co-pana the Doditathine.
So that's the first copy. Copy का first calculate.
You only crazy. कोनो मैंने राज गुरु के धन्यवाद दीजिए जिनका सब ले ले उनका very sorry रिकॉर्ड में नहीं आ रहा बंद कर दिया उनका कौन है तो हाँ हाँ उपाध्याय ब्राह्मण देखो हम मैथिल ब्राह्मण सी हमारा बोलो तो भेंट कर सुविधा नहीं चाहिए अब वो कहीं तक में देखे हमारा इतने वाली लिपि कोना कहलो है ना तो हमारे काज आसान दे रहे हैं अच्छा even latest 2013 में जो अकादमी में रामदेव बाबू कहे थे वो आगे पहले वो छापा थे बंगाली स्कॉलर छापे थे आई वो बंगाली के दुख देखो थे अपन ये दुख से इनका हमार का देखना को बुझन में हमार वाला दुख कहाँ से देखा जाता है ये क्रम तो चलते रहते हैं but I'm not aware of things which समय के हमारा नहीं ज्ञान लड़कों तो इंडियन देखते हैं अंतिम छपने हुआ तो से अपनी सब देखिए पूरा ब्रॉड लाभ है तो thanks for asking yes
स्वाति से अनुरोध कर रहे हैं वो एक रमाना मेरा सर के कमेंटो सर ये दोनों ये हमारा अतिथि थी उनका प्रदान किया जाए
I missed the instructions.
ग्रुप फोटोग्राफी
अनुमति सरकार कार्यक्रम
सर
अब जाइयो तो बोलते
Perhaps.
So frame
हाँ खत्म हो गया
तो क्या
सरकार सुने रेलवे बाइक
चार बजे तक
चलिए इजाजत परसों मिल रहा है
चेंज हो जाए बताइए कि फिर करना है कि नहीं बहुत सीखने को मिला बहुत कुछ।
कल कौन रहेंगे यहाँ? वो कौन कह रहे थे कल रहेंगे नहीं?
हम रहेंगे
को कहा रहे थे कि कल हम नहीं रहेंगे, घर चले जाएंगे, बेगूसराय चले जाएंगे।
नहीं हम
रहेंगे ना? चलो यहाँ कुछ झूठा पीछे देखो, ये मैं सर का अच्छा ये सबके होटल में है ना, पानी है, पानी छोड़ दे, कल काम आएगा वैसे भी।
ये गलत हुआ, हम तीनों अपना फोटो ले रहे हैं।
हाँ
ये रहे कि आज हम तीनों थे क्या
बस खत्म हो गया हम जो प्रोफेसर जा रहे हैं बाहर उनको अपने पूजा दीजिए।
चलिए एक खींच दीजिए हम
जो बैठे हैं उसमें काम दे गए हम पूजा दीजिए बस। अभी रास्ते में जो निकले यहाँ से
आज के बाद
तो लेके ट्रेन को रेलवे को जाना है जहाँ हमें प्रोग्राम
सिर दर्द कर गया है, मेरा दवाई से भी कुछ नहीं हुआ।
ठीक
अरे अभी काम छोड़ दो थोड़ी देर।
सबसे ज्यादा कैंटीन में कोई नहीं जगह बहुत मस्त
जी ऐसा बात नहीं
सर करनी है
अच्छा लैपटॉप तुम लेना है, लैपटॉप वगैरह मेरा है यहाँ।
लैपटॉप मेरा है।
एक मिनट मैं
उधर भी किसी का अच्छा खाना तीसरी बार क्या है।
हाँ पता नहीं
पानी छोड़ना तो नहीं, कल काम आ जाएगा, कल कुछ और भी लेके जाना पड़ेगा। कल के लिए अच्छा यहाँ रहेगा ना तो
आपसे बेहतर तो नहीं
बीच में एक बार चाय कॉफी भी चला
स्थिति जरूर सुधर जाएगी
कॉफी
इंशाल्लाह।
इसको पता पड़ेगा
अच्छा नहीं है क्या फोन नहीं उठाता
मैं ना उसी को किसी को हाँ
फोन उठाता
वही
ठीक है देर से बत्ती खुल रहा है पर ठीक है भाई चलो हटा ले अब इसको।
हाँ वो अपना लैपटॉप हटा दे।
वही बताया लेकिन जो मिल गया दोबारा नहीं मिला अल्लाह इसी दिन हम मुझे पैसे डाल देते
आज
देने दीजिए तो मैं बोल रहा था मुझे उनका पर्स खाली कर
गिर ना जाए हम
लेकिन लवली तेज आ गई वही मास्टर माइंड है ना तो वही है इधर तरीके से इसका मैसेज आया था बाबू कोई है क्या नाम से मैसेज आया था